sure it's working. Just a second. Come on. Thank you. Sure it's working. Just a second. It's working. All righty. Great. Let's go back to my keynote. Okie doke. All right. The recording started. First of all, happy May the 4th be with you, everybody. So, Star Wars Day. Saw a lot of people doing different things. This is a repeat. If you have Yahoo, AT&T, SBCglobal.net, and Comcast even a bit, but not as bad, you really need to work on getting another email address and make this one be less of a thing, because I I predict in the near future they'll go away. And secondly, they are just plain broken. I spent with a client 5 hours over a span of 2 days to try get their computer hooked up. That was a new iMac that had migrated over from an old iMac, and it was just terrible. It's broken. And what you have to realize is when they're going to be giving 5 hours of customer support away for free, that costs them so much on a free account that, it means it's not going to be there much longer. So anyway, also be really careful. There's a lot of scams out there. There's one that says that your iCloud is full and all that. Never click on the links in these emails. Just go to the site and see what it is. When I hover over, when I look at this Costco thing, because this one was sent to me, I went up to where it says, oh, in fact, hang on, let me turn on my Pro Mouse. You guys are seeing my screen, correct? So,
Yes.
all right. So up here, when I click on Costco membership with a period, this is the address it goes to. Well, Kids School Learn is probably not Costco sending you an official email. So always look at that. Always be suspect. You can also hover over these links, and you're not getting a free Costco membership. Sorry. What they're going to do is try harvest your credit card. So stay tuned. And Tuesday, we're going to have an Apple special event at 7 a.m. Pacific, which is interesting. More than likely, it will feature a new Apple Pencil. That's why you see that in the Let Loose ad, or the Let Loose graphic there. But every indication is there'll be a new iPad Pro, one or more new iPad Pros, one or more new iPad Airs. There's no mention of the mini, unfortunately, and the regular iPad has been updated recently, so that's probably not going to come into play on this. So I would say you go to apple.com at 7 a.m. on Tuesday and see what's going on. Uh, Actually, Mary had this. She asked these questions last time. We kind of went through them, and it was kind of poignant that she asked if do I need a new iPad? Well, it's time to time to see the new stuff and see what's up. Another thing at the bottom there, CCI, or the old Sure West, is getting out of the TV business. It's my understanding, and you need to look at alternatives on that. And those alternatives would be Comcast uh, for TV. This person really, not Mary, but the person that put that on here, was really interested in keeping with a regular old DVR. So anyway, just try to avoid contracts And if you're thinking about going streaming, I always recommend going to clark.com and then search for clark.com and then streaming. And Clark Howard has a staff of people that keep up to date on all the different channels you can get with different streaming products, because that's the big thing to check is what are you gonna what stations do you want to watch? This is from a couple 10 days ago or so from my backyard. Nice spring sunset. And what a nice sunny spring day we're having today, aren't they? Right in Sacramento. I recently went to the total eclipse. I have some pictures of it. It was an awesome trip, and it was a total of 5,326 miles. Of that, I drove less than 100 miles actual driving myself. The car drove it the entire time. It drove me the entire time with the new full self-driving. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. The What that allowed me to do is to drive 19 hours the last day, because you don't get fatigued when it's driving forward for you. What you don't realize is if you're driving 3 hours on I-5, most people get very fatigued. You're constantly moving your hands and you're constantly using your brain to keep the car centered between the lines, along with everything else you're doing. You don't realize you're doing that because it's second nature and it's almost instinctual that you're doing it. But in fact, it is mentally and physically fatiguing. I did this 19 hours and I had it set up so I could pretty much stop wherever I wanted along the way. But that was my trip back from Tucson. So actually, I went here on the way down. I went around Death Valley, came on down. I made a stop around Tucson, picked up my friend Ken, who's a former MacNexus member. Then we went around Texas, saw the eclipse, drove back. We went to White Sands on the way back and Las Cruces. And if you're ever in New Mexico, you have to make sure you go get it's called a Frito pie. And it's a bag of Fritos that they put chili, onions, and cheese in the torn open bag. And it started in Santa Fe, New Mexico at the Five and Dime store at the lunch counter at a Five and Dime. And I had it originally at that particular location. So then my last day coming back from Tucson, I came all the way back 986 miles. So I left at 3:30 a.m. and arrived home at 10:30. I hit snow on the top of Highway 50. One thing that was interesting is, and this shows me taking 80. I came back 50 actually, but the road was wet, and I I entered Highway 50 in South Lake Tahoe around 9 p.m. And when the road's wet and they haven't repainted the lines like they do every spring, there's oncoming traffic and it's really, really, really hard to see. So I was actually driving it at the time. And I said, you know what? This is so hard to see. I'm going to turn on full self-driving because I've had it on for most of the trip. But in a situation like that, I'm still a little bit uncomfortable with it. So I turned it on and it navigated perfectly in spite of all these bright lights and everything else. I was still very vigilant, making sure that I had my hands on the steering wheel, my foot hovering above the brake and things like that. But I was it made it much easier. Although it's still a little tentative, but boy, I'll tell you, I was blown away. It made no mistakes, and it was seeing the road better than I could because I could look down at my instrument console and see where it was forecasting where the lines are. So it's improved dramatically. We're going to go into a few more details on that. I went out there for the eclipse, and this is called solar prominence. They used to call them solar flares, but I guess that for some reason is not the thing uh, anymore. It's and you can see actually if I go back a slide in the four corners, and it has nothing to do with compass locations. It's just where these four ended up being. They're not always there. So in a full eclipse, the diameter of the moon and the distance it's from us matches the sun perfectly, and you get some corona around there. Now, last October, I went to the middle of Nevada for what's called an annular eclipse. And the moon, of course, doesn't change size, but when the moon was a little farther away from the Earth, it doesn't mask the entire sun, and it puts a ring around there, and the ring is kind of cool. But what happens is the ring is so bright, you're less likely to see as much of these prominence. But secondly, you won't see the true corona as much. Now, there were a lot of images online about different coronas and stuff. You got to be careful. A lot of those were artificial intelligence generated, and people were claiming certain things. So anyway, this is solar prominence. And let's see if I'll put that link in the chat for you so you can read about it. Where'd my chat window go? Hello. There it is. Good deal. All right. So back to this. So that's it was a good time. We were everything's about making sure that you have all the information you can, because it was destined to be very cloudy. I was an hour and a half northwest of Austin, and I had the day before the eclipse in a 150-mile strip of totality. I pinpointed ahead of time 3 spots that I'd be interested in, and that were in the part of totality. And so I explored them. And then I woke up at 3:30 in the morning and checked. I have an app that forecasts cloud cover. It's called Open Snow. And it was forecasting not good. It was forecasting cloud cover in all 3 of my locations. And the one that had the best forecast is the one I headed to, and it was about an hour away. And we really preferred that spot because there were 6 outhouses there and everything else. So you really had portable potties there and stuff. And so it was an ideal spot. So I said, well, we got to leave early to get there. So we left the hotel at 4 in the morning and rolled in at 5 o'clock. And the next person, I thought it was going to be super crowded. And mind you, the eclipse is going to start happening around noon. Uh, when I figured, hey, can stay around in a hotel, or we'll be in comfortable chairs out where the eclipse is going to be and maybe see a sunrise and stuff. And it's a little cloudy, a little drizzly. So an hour later, the second person shows up. And then an hour after that, the third person showed up. And then a few more people showed up, but it wasn't very crowded because this particular street was new and wasn't on any of the maps except the one in my car. And I only found it because the day before I was checking out this one road that was in totality. And when I was checking out that road, it kind of would work, but it was a narrower road, and any of the turnouts on the road were entrances to farms or ranches, and so you don't want to clog them up. So on the way back, I just saw this one little, it's a housing project that has the roads and the curbs and gutters in, but no homes yet. And it was perfect, absolutely perfect. We ended up having the clouds became an issue about half of the time, but it wasn't consistent in that you could always get at every stage of the eclipse, I could always get a photo of it. And during the totality, the 4.5 minutes of totality, about half the time the sun was, well, I would say visible, but of course it was masked by the moon. So really cool. You should start making your plans, because the next one in North America for a total eclipse will be in, it's either 2044 or 2045. I can't remember. So, all right.
I
So
think
any
most of us
questions?
won't be around.
Eclipse? What's that, Bob?
I think most of us won't be around by then.
I know. That's why I made sure I went to this one. So, and did anybody view it from here? Because you had about a 36% coverage. Randy, was it? Did you have good viewing?
Yeah, the little pinhole in the paper worked, and that was about it. But I did have those special solar glasses that you could see, so I
Right.
could see, the 30% that was impacted. But yeah, not as good
And
as you.
did it noticeably get darker?
Not to me, no.
Oh, really?
Maybe,
Except when you put the glasses on, because they're so dark, right?
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So before I get into technology, well, yeah, let's do the technology thing kind of quick here. So, all right. So you all know I'm a big Tesla fan, but I'm only, I think they're the cutting edge of many types of technology. So, and since I follow them so closely, I know a lot of this information, and I also see all the misinformation out there. But please take this as an overview of technology and how things are morphing, rather than it's this isn't a sales pitch for Tesla. It's really only because I'm so close to it, I see what's going on. But let's talk about kind of the beginning of it. Tesla, of course, started as a car company, but they were always not necessarily a car company. They were kind of, everybody said it's a computer on wheels. So we talk about compute and that. And the big thing is they're a startup software company that just happens to do things with wheels. So Tesla, of course, what they did is they said, well, we need to be able to charge the cars, because a gas car uses service stations and things like that. So since nobody was going to do it, they decided to make a charging network. And now their charging network will be open to other car makers, and I think that's great. And their charging network is fantastic. This 5,300 mile trip I took, I I waited for charging on the way back. I waited for charging at the most 20 minutes, where I'm actually waiting. The rest of the time, it was going to the bathroom, it was going in, getting water, or, having a meal, just a quick meal, not, at we stopped at a Chick-fil-A, or you stop at a Panera Bread or something like that. And by the time you get your charging's done. So you can't count that as waiting time, because you're eating. So it's really improved dramatically. Um, going and so it really surprises me, because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, it's telling me my car is ready and I can go, and I still haven't finished eating yet. So it's very little inconvenience. And especially on long trips, 5,300 miles, that's a long way. So my last day was 986 miles. Anyway, uh, the key to the cars are batteries. And there is now finally becoming enough batteries being made worldwide that they can do other things with the batteries. Now let's talk about how they make the batteries, because that's the first thing that there's so much fake news out about there. A lithium ion battery, less than 2% of the battery is lithium. And so everybody says, well, my gosh, and you've probably all seen these photos. I should have brought it up. there's a photo of a big open pit lithium mine that they talk about. Oh my God, you've got to mine so much lithium in this. Well, that actual photo is a 25-year-old photo of an open pit copper mine in Bolivia. Lithium, for the most part, is not mined. It's done the same way we acquire salt. It's in the water, and as the water evaporates, it leaves minerals behind. And lithium is a very common mineral. It's the third or fourth most common mineral there is. So, and very little of the battery is lithium. And yeah, there are some precious metals and some rare earth metals in the batteries, but the big change is that, and what the surprising thing with the battery is, the components of the battery, the materials that make up the battery, are not just going into one battery. Well, first of all, the current batteries in most electric vehicles will last 500,000 miles. So if you figure a 10-year lifespan, you're easily going to get that out of it. And then many batteries will become home storage batteries and have a second life with that, or even go out to energy storage, or they're sold on eBay for parts. So, but the best part is there's now a process to recycle the batteries. And the way it works is they take the battery and they essentially pulverize it and crush it. And when they do this, it consists of different elements. And if you know the periodic table, well, all elements have different weights. So they pulverize this battery into essentially the particles are small enough like sand. And then what they can do is every element that's in the battery weighs differently. So if you think of liquids in a centrifuge, you can separate the liquids by their weight in a centrifuge. You do the same thing, not in a centrifuge, but in essentially a shaker table. And a company called Redwood Materials, one of the co-founders of Tesla, they've started up in Reno. There's other ones out there. And they pulverize this battery and they actually recover 95% of all of the components of the battery, including the stainless steel case on the outside, the anode, the cathode, the lithium, the cadmium, all of that. So they essentially become the new mine. Their biggest obstacle right now is there aren't enough batteries to recycle because the batteries are lasting so long. So the hardest part about this recycling is get enough of them. But the same battery that's in your iPhone or in your electric drill, all those lithium ion batteries can be broken down and 95% of all the elements recovered. Because what happens in a battery is you have the plus and the minus. So you have what's called an anode and a cathode. And they call them lithium ion. And there's other component types batteries now. There's lithium iron phosphate and things like that. But the ions are little electrons that go back and forth in a very simplistic thing. And what happens is when you charge the batteries, the anodes go one direction. They go back. I don't know if they go to the cathode or the anode, and I apologize. It's one way or the other. So when they charge it, those ions go that way. And then when you use the battery, whether it be for home storage, for your drill, or for your iPhone or your car, the ions travel the other way. And that's when it discharges. And then, of course, you plug it in and those ions go back the other way. Well, the actual components in the battery don't lose any of what they are. What happens is, think about it like a coffee filter that got too full of grounds and it has too much in there and it won't really, there's just the coffee, it's clogged up and the coffee can't go through. Well, what happens in a lithium ion battery is the ions, a few of them don't make the round trip. That's why, for instance, on your iPhone, after a year's time, you may have a 90% of your full capacity of your phone might be depleted by 90% or so. And that's just simply the ions not able to make that round trip. So the thing that you can do is when you break down the ions, those are just kind of go out in the ether. But when you break the battery down and you remake a brand new battery, you're using, in fact, a higher grade of those raw materials than when they built the battery from in the beginning. So they become the new mine. So it's really a closed cycle type of thing. And they currently can do 95%. I have a feeling they're going to improve that a little bit better. But the best thing is it's a super easy way to do batteries. They can't disassemble a battery because there's too many components that go into it and everything else. So it's this whole thing about what's going to happen. The second thing that you hear about with electric cars is, well, our grid can't support it. Well, the interesting thing is 98% of all car charging happens at night. And we have the grid has a tremendous amount of excess electricity at night. And that's why the rates are so much lower at night, is because an electric power plant, for instance, there's one down in Morro Bay. So that electric power plant, so hydroelectric is a little different, but a power plant that is producing energy from coal or nuclear or natural gas, it has to run at 100% all the time. That's how it works. And so what happens is there's excess electricity at night, so they sell that for cheaper. Well, that's when most cars charge. Obviously, it doesn't happen if you're on a long road trip, but 98% of all charging is done at night. You plug your car in just like you plug your phone in. So that's a whole nother myth that's out there. Now, that being said, I personally and politically am completely against the government mandating it, because we live in supposedly a free country and people should be able to buy what they want. And the thing is that the current gas cars are not that hard on the environment. But what'll happen here within the next 2 years, or actually it's happening about now, it's cheaper to produce an electric car than it is to produce a gas car. So what'll happen is the market will drive that, because the electric car that used to be very expensive is no longer very expensive. And the market will drive that. So you're going to have proliferation of them. So that's coming shortly. To take this whole cycle back, and where we get back to batteries, Tesla and all other companies were battery constrained. In other words, they couldn't get enough batteries. There's enough batteries being produced now that you can do other things, like have home storage. For instance, if you have solar on your roof and you produce excess power from your solar, you can store it in a battery, and that battery can then provide electricity for you when the peak time is in the middle of the day and you're not producing enough solar, but you need to be able to run the air conditioner or things like that. And this is also happening. I'll have a slide up here in a minute. They're doing this in huge amounts at big power plants. And I'll give you a little tip. I mentioned Morro Bay. Well, there's a big PG&E plant there that makes power. Well, in the summer, when we have tremendous amounts of energy needed, the grid can't handle it, and the power plant is already putting out 100%. So they have these things called peaker plants, Peaker. They're for the peak. They're peaker plants. And think of them as a large, very large generator. They're usually fed with natural gas. So of course they're not great for the environment. But the thing is that the grid is saying, okay, we can't get enough from the power plant. We have to supplement it with a peaker plant. So the peaker plant runs, and it's only run on an as needed basis because it's a very expensive way to get power. And secondly, it's not super clean. So it only fires up when the grid itself has a higher demand. Now, what they've done in Morro Bay is, and they've started it and it's already working, but they're going to expand it, is they have a whole bunch of batteries down there. So at night, when the power plant, let's say it's a summer day that's going to be 110 the next day. Well, at night, the power plant has excess storage capacity. So it fills those batteries up. And then in the middle of the day, when the demand on the grid is 110% of what it can produce, they can drain the batteries and use the power from the batteries. And those batteries are good for at least 20 years and probably beyond. And they're using a slightly different chemistry, but they're essentially using the same kind of battery that's in the cars. And that is proliferating now because battery prices have dropped dramatically because there are enough batteries being made. So that's a huge thing. And it also works well because it supplements the solar. You can have large solar farms that produce a lot of energy, but obviously when the sun goes down, they're not going to produce anything. So their energy can be stored in batteries and then can be distributed. It also works in wind farms, and it's been being done very successfully in Australia. So, and then to the left of this, solar, of course, solar and wind being a renewable can feed these batteries, but solar on its own still needs to depend on the grid because it's not light all the time. Just a quick little aside, this thing called auto bidder, that is, Tesla has a way for if you have a home storage battery, you can, as the peak rates go up, they'll give you more money for your electricity, and you also become a power producer. The next thing I'm going to go into over this, and it's about artificial intelligence. Pete did a great class on artificial intelligence, and there's so much great stuff in that. But the key to artificial intelligence is the size of the learning machine. In other words, these huge supercomputers. Well, that's coming to fruition. NVIDIA has done, if you have NVIDIA stock, congratulations. It's done very, very well because they have a great computer for that, where NVIDIA was known mainly for graphic cards, but they've taken that, and it turns out that their computers are really good for AI. Tesla has bought tens of thousands of those, and they're developing their own. But what that will lead to is, first of all, what Tesla learned with full self-driving, and the newest version of full self-driving is based on AI. And what they did is, in 8 months ago, there were still 300,000 lines of code inside the computer to tell the car that, well, if I see an 8-sided red sign that has the word stop on it, you need to stop. And that was a line of code. Well, the problem with that is, what happens if a truck has bent one of the edges of that 8-sided sign and it no longer looks like an octagon? So those edge cases are tough. What they have done is they have thrown out all those lines of code, and they have taken the same car and the feedback from all of these cars, and they are not saying, okay, there's a red sign up here, here's what you need, what the car needs to do. They're doing it now, where they're recording this video, and it says, well, when this driver, when these millions of drivers approach a red sign that's 8-sided with the word stop on it, they put their foot on the brake or take their foot off the accelerator and let it brake. And then after they've come to a complete stop, they start going. In other words, what they're doing is, the drivers are teaching the artificial and the large computer that has what's called machine learning. It is, because the only thing that happens is, you've got input, it's got input from 8 cameras in the car, and it takes those 8 cameras and said, okay, here's the situation. And that's a very common situation. You got a 4-way stop, 3-way stop, whatever it is. And how do the majority of drivers react to that? And they only take the top tier drivers and things. So they say, oh, this is what we need to do in that case. And so then the machine can learn. And when there's edge cases, for instance, if you're on full self-driving and you disengage, it will immediately send that video clip anonymously to the computer, so it will learn, well, why did this person disengage? And it will get better and better and better. And it's the machine getting the input and then learning what to do. It's not a programmer telling it what to do. And I would equate this to if you ever watched back in the days when 3D movies were kind of starting and they were trying to, or slow motion, they would analyze a runner's gait, let's say, or a tennis player hitting it. They would put these little dots on the joints, because the joint, you can tell where the movement is. And then they photographed that and they had the computer analyze it. Well, that's the same thing. The computer is analyzing what these drivers are doing. So all that information, billions of miles of driving, gets sent to this computer and it does it. And it's all done with 8 cameras. That's different from Tesla's full self-driving and other people's automated driving. This is the real world. We operate just fine with 2 eyes. In fact, you can drive with 1 eye, you just don't have good depth perception. So that's why the trend that Tesla sees, and many others are, rather than having a dog that can do tricks and flips and everything else, if you have a humanoid robot, the humanoid robot can be taught by a human on what to do. So the fingers articulate, the legs articulate. They do exactly the same thing that a human will do. And so therefore, if the task is to walk over here, bend down, pick up a box, and then take and put the box over here on a shelf, the computer, the eyes in the robot can see the person do it. The computer will analyze it, and then the robot will do it. And as the robot does it more and more and more, it will have a little more dexterity and things like that. There is video from, 8 months ago, where they're picking up blue or green blocks, and the robot is putting them with its fingers, it's squeezing it and putting it in whichever box it's supposed to be in. And at one point, one of the persons knocks it out of the hand of the robot, and it just goes and picks it up, and it knows which one. It says, okay, that's a green one, that goes here, things like that. And that's very rudimentary at this point, but that learning curve. And if you think about this, not from the creepy sense, but think about what a humanoid robot could do in a steel factory where it's a really dangerous situation. There's hot molten metal around, there's things like that. That is very, very difficult and dangerous for humans. So you could replace that with a robot. It's in the future, it won't be uncommon to think about, for about $20,000, you might get a humanoid robot that'll clean your house for you. I mean, you already have Roombas, which are kind of robotized vacuum cleaners, but how about one that'll do everything? It'll do the wash, do everything else you want. And that's where this is going. And that and the battery energy storage is a huge future. So that's thrown a lot out on this. Any questions at this point, please? I know you may be glazed over a little bit, and I have a tendency to speak too quick, so you can always go back over the tape on that. But and if there's any flaws, bring it up too. I mean, AI is scary too, because AI unchecked. I mean, we all watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and well, and it's weird. Here's May the 4th today. It's Star Wars days. You think about C3PO and R2D2. They were great. So June has a question. Somebody's listening. Go ahead, June. Ask your question.
Hi. I have an old iPhone, and I just came from the iPhone store a couple days ago, and the one I want is $929. And I just want to see if I understood you correctly. I think you said after about a year, the capacity of the phone battery is 90%.
Depending on how you charge, I would say between 90 and 95% is the battery, which means when you charge to 100%, it's 5 or 10% less than it would be. But it's close to that. It might be. I would say 95 is a better metric.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I'm excited. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, and you can always put new batteries in the phones. And that's another thing, is the battery technology in the phones and the cars and everything else is improving dramatically all the time. And in fact, there's essentially little computers that will in there to make sure your charging is right. And sometimes on your iPhone, it'll say, well, you know what? You don't need a full charge yet. We're going to only charge you to 80%. Because what happens is when everything on a battery is based, whether it be a battery in a car or energy storage or your iPhone or your drill, everything's based on a rechargeable battery. Everything is based on charge cycles. So generally speaking, right now, lithium ion batteries operate between a 1,000 to 1,500 charge cycle. And then they're not bad, but they've depleted enough where they only have 50% of their original capacity. And in an iPhone, that means that you're probably not going to get all day out of it. And that's why they had the one lawsuit a while back where Apple said, well, these people with these 2-year-old phones, the phones won't last through the day. So what they did is they slowed down the processor. So the phone doesn't work as well, but it lasts all day. And that's its first job. So, but it's gotten tremendously better and getting better all the time. But when you think about it, there's a tremendous amount of energy stored in those batteries. And actually that brings up, there's all kind of news out there that Teslas catch fire all the time. Well, you have to remember most of this fake news, like with the lithium and everything else, none of it is based in fact. In fact, it's usually overblown and someone is trying to capitalize on that. And that would be the people that short sell Tesla and other technology stocks. They're betting against the company. The statistics, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration keeps statistics on every single car fire anywhere throughout the nation. And when you look at the statistics, first of all, if you read the news, you would think that you're taking your life in your hands by driving a Tesla or charging it at home. Well, the actual statistics prove that you are 11 times, not 11%, but you are 11 times less likely to get in a fire in a Tesla than in a gas car. And those are the real statistics. And based on number of cars and everything else. So it's much ado about nothing. And in fact, the weird thing is a gas car can explode, and battery fires, when they happen, are fairly slow. One of the very first incidents of it was a guy driving along in Oregon, and a big metal spike came up and punctured the battery from underneath. And since then, they put a little titanium piece to keep things from doing it. But that particular incident, the guy runs over this thing and it throws the car up, and then it lands and it poked a hole in the battery, and a warning came up on the thing. You should probably pull over. Then a little bit later, it says, you need to pull over now. Pull over right away, and like that. And this whole time, the guy had plenty of time to get out of the car and things like that. And it was just a total freak thing. So anyway, if a gas car had run over and it punctured the gas tank, more than likely there would have been an explosion. So anyway, but the battery thing, the other question that comes up is, should I keep my iPhone plugged in all the time? I do. And because I can relate to when the Paradise Fire happened, and I know of 2 people that had 8 minutes to gather their belongings, get out of their house. And that's the time when I would want to have a full charge. And so the slight amount it will deplete the life of your battery, it's not worth it to not have it charged. And Randy, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up for a question there, but please go ahead.
Yeah, back to June's question in regards to iPhone battery maintenance and well-being. Is there any benefit to setting your phone to charge to that 80% option?
Yes, but with everything, there's reward, benefit, other ways. is it will increase the longevity of your battery. So I would say if you generally get a new phone every 2 years, don't worry. If you generally keep your phone longer, you're going to want to you're going to want to do when it recommends it, but just remember that you know if you're going to be out all day the next day, make sure your phone charges to 100% before you go. I personally always have a charger in my car. When I travel, I have a backup battery with me. So, and I'm obsessed about making sure it's charged when in fact I have all the resources all the time to make sure I can get by with it. But yeah, there is something to be said. In fact, well, and what's really weird, there's new technology come out that's out now. This the battery technology that a lot of cars, including Tesla, are using is called LFP. It's lithium. F is iron. Lithium iron phosphate is the P. And those batteries can do so many cycle counts, they actually recommend charging them to 100%. And we may be starting to see those in phones. What happens is everything's based on what's called energy density. In other words, if you think about the phone, you have a limited place, a limited spot that the battery can go into, and you really want to have all the power you can in there. So you're going to have a higher grade battery, where if you have an LFP battery, you may get maybe 10 or 15% less energy out of it, but you can charge it to 100%, which is really funny because that almost makes up for the fact that you should normally just charge your car to 85% or something like that. So it's a trade-off, but it's changing dramatically. But that's the other thing is, do not believe any of these things about they have this new solid state battery technology. Toyota, who is very late to the battery game and was very embracing the fuel cell technology of hydrogen, which is the worst thing anybody can do. That's finally failing now. I mean, there's no place you can go fill those cars up now, and it's terrible technology. But they were all on that bandwagon. So now because to placate shareholders and stuff, they say, well, we have the greatest battery coming out. Well, I'm sorry, Toyota, you actually built really good hybrids, and those hybrid batteries did great, but they totally dropped the ball after that. They have not been into the plug-in, completely battery operated cars. And hybrids all use batteries too. And the plug-in hybrids are something that are pretty good, but I'll show you in a couple slides here why you should get a regular battery car. Lisa, go right ahead with your question.
Yeah, just back on the cell phone or the iPhone, the battery optimization setting that, as mine does, it'll charge it overnight up to 80% and then wait for the last 20% until it's like, oh, this is when she's normally up and using the phone.
Right.
That's all part of helping the battery last longer.
Yes, it's all about in the battery thing, we talk about degradation. And let's just give an example, and I'm making up a number here, but let's say the battery would be good for 15 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's make it easy. We'll say 10 hours. And after 2 years, if the battery's degraded by 10%, it's when you charge it to 100%, it's only good for 9 hours then. And so if you think about it, in a gas car situation, it would be more like if there was sludge that got into your tank and took away capacity of your gas tank to hold more gas. In other words, the battery can't hold as many electrons or the power you need because those ions get clogged up going back and forth. And that's from the number of charge cycles. Now, two other things that degrade batteries pretty well. So first of all, if you charge a battery to 100%, it will degrade a little bit unless it's an LFP battery. It will degrade a little bit just because it doesn't like being at 100%, but they also don't like being below 20%. So those are on the edges is where you have it, but also heat is a factor. And heat of the battery can make a big difference on its longevity also, because what it does is it more ions will get clogged up. So that's where, in fact, like in most electric cars, you have heating and cooling of the battery to keep it within an optimum range because it produces enough energy. Obviously, on the phone, we don't want to have a fan on it and things like that. But that's why you'll notice sometimes if you're out in the sun a lot and it's warm, your screen goes darker on your phone. And that's because it's trying to conserve not using as much energy. So that's one thing when I travel a lot, if I'm in a bus and the window's exposed or things like that, I try to make sure that whether it's in a pocket or whatever, I shade that phone as much as possible, because when it gets too warm, it will darken the screen and you can't see what you're doing taking photos. But secondly, it's harder on the battery. So, and they do get a little warm when they charge sometimes too. It tries to manage that because there's this trade-off of fast charging versus slow charging, which doesn't heat up as much. But I think everybody has noticed over the years, there's longer life with your Apple devices, and Apple uses top tier components in the batteries. So,
Yeah, and I have a question.
sure, Bob.
Ford with their Mustang commercials, the all electric Mustang,
Uh-huh.
they are making this claim that they have the largest charging network. I'm thinking that's bullshit, but what do you have to say about that?
Well, they do now because they're part of NACS, which is Tesla's charging network.
Oh, so they're trying to claim credit even though it's Tesla's net.
Well, but not
That is
just
BS.
Tesla's. Well, okay. So, good question. We'll talk about the charging network first. Tesla has more chargers than anyone else. In fact, let me bring up a map. This to me really does it. So, and I'll post the link. This is not Tesla. This is an independent guy that posts the Tesla ones. And I'll put the link in the chat. So if I click this map, well, first of all, there are, and I did a stat on this, and where is my slide? I got to figure that out. If we go into North America, well, basically, let me get to the map. So here's the US. So every red dot is a Tesla charging station. And let me make that bigger. And on average, each of these red dots has 15 charging stalls. Okay. Oh, so in the US, so there's 2,200 stations, and they average about 14 per station. There's one down Harris Ranch has 98 stalls. So the red dots are all the ones that are open. The blue triangles are the ones in the permit process. And then I don't see any of the construction ones. Yeah, the construction ones are, oh yeah, the little orange cones are in construction. And so this makes it a huge network. There's another big network called Electrify America. Electrify America is charging stations that Teslas can use with an adapter, or most of the other cars can use them. And now, like I said, the majority of the cars being made starting this year and into next year, can use the Tesla charging network. And it's very convenient. The difference is the Tesla network, when I'm navigating, it'll tell me there's 6 people at the next charging station there's 15 stalls available, something like that. And so you can navigate with that really, really, really easy. And in my 230,000 miles that I've driven since 2015, when I got my first Tesla, there are 5 times I've ever waited for charging, and only one time was 10 minutes, and the rest of the time had been under 5 minutes. So, if there's a big line at one, it makes the news and all that other stuff. But I have a lot of experience in charging, and it's not that big of a deal. But they're opening up tons of them. There was just some recent news that just hit that they fired the supercharging people, laid them off from Tesla. There's something in the works with that, so don't jump to a conclusion on it. It did concern me, and I think it'll be resolved. But when you look how built out this is, I mean, I just did this 5,800-mile trip, and it wasn't a problem. So what Ford does is Ford can use Electrify America, and they can use the Tesla network now. In fact, they provide a free adapter to the Lightning owners and the Mustang Mach-E owners. And Chevy's doing the same thing. Ford was the first one to get on board. And they're actually going to be in the cars they start producing in 2025. They will actually be the same adapter that Tesla uses, because the adapter called NACS, North American Charging Standard, the cables are, I mean, they're really easy, and they're thinner, and everything's more compact, where these other ones are just, you kind of struggle with them. So that's where I'm sure they got that. And they're actually integrating, Ford is one of the first companies to make it. Rivian does it also, but they're making it so you can navigate to the charging stations. In my car, man, I can navigate to these charging stations. And the other cool thing is it'll preheat the battery before you get there, so you're at optimum charging temperature once you get there. So good question, but I think, yeah, and Ford has been pretty progressive with it. The problem with Ford, problem with GM, problem with Rivian, problem with Lucid is none of them make a profit on their electric car or their electric truck. And that's tough, and that's hard to be sustainable. As the battery prices drop, that'll come into play a little bit more. So hopefully that answered your question, Barb. And Bob, and then Barb has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is coming back to what you said about that you keep a charger in the car in case of emergencies like the Paradise Fire. So does keeping a charger or a power bank have an issue in terms of heat if your car is sitting out in the sun all the time? I know those are two different things, but my question applies to both of them.
Yeah, and you're talking about for charging the phone. Yeah, so I don't necessarily keep it in my car. When I travel, I always travel with a battery. In my car, I have a charger. So I do a MagSafe in my car. So I get in my car, my phone's always charging. So I'm always at 100%.
Okay.
So, and I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. But I trade in my phone to Apple every year. So I don't care if my phone is degraded to 95%, because it's that little bit of time. Hey, I want to make sure my battery life lasts. So the charging, the ones, there are some that go magnetically to the mag back, or you have a little charging cable or things like that. Those also are subject to the same rules because they're lithium ion batteries, essentially. And they are the same rules about heat and everything else. But you're not likely to do as many charge cycles with them. So you're not going to have that degradation. But yeah, you have to worry about heat. And the other thing that comes up is when I'm traveling, I'll put that on when I'm in the bus, but if I'm out and if I'm in the middle of the Sahara Desert, I'm probably not going to charge my phone with an external adapter, because that will increase the amount of heat in the phone. And when the phone gets too hot, it will darken the screen, making it almost unusable for photos.
Yeah. What about having a power bank in the car? Just, like we're in the same boat that Paradise is down here in Monterey. Fires can come very, very quickly.
Yeah, but you can charge your phone in the car. So the power bank while you're in the car does you no good. But oh yeah, I would say no, more than anything, I think everybody should have a go bag. And in that go
Yeah.
bag should be cables, should also be a powered charging brick. And most of those charging
Yeah.
bricks are power banks. You know, they do last quite a while charged.
Yeah.
You know, it's like so the recently I've had to go to the hospital a few times, you know, and so
Yeah.
when I go to the ER, I take my Scotty vest, I load my iPhone, I load my iPad, I put extra cables, and I make sure I even have a plug into the wall because who knows how long I'm going to be there. And then sometimes I'll take my MacBook Pro with me. But you know, it's one of those things where that all that stuff you need, and that would be the same as a go bag kind of thing.
Good idea.
And I think, yeah, if you're in a fire prone area, that's stuff you need in your go bag.
Yeah.
We helped out. In fact, some people from MacNexus helped out because there was the guy from High Hand Nursery was getting a lot of supplies. He was organizing during the Paradise Fire, he organized trucks of hay to go up because of the animals that were displaced, all kinds of stuff. And so he was doing Red Cross, and then and I know of two people that had 8 minutes to get out of their house, and so that was pretty traumatic. So I gathered what I could on that, but then I reached out and I talked to the guy at High Hand and I say, hey, what do you need up there? I mean, I have a group, we can get computers, whatever. And he says, no, you know, computers are a bit of a burden because if you think about it, they've really got to be plugged in most of the time. But he said iPads. And so the generous people at MacNexus and up here at the Apple user group, I forget how many iPads we gathered and a few iPhones, but mostly iPads, and got them to them. And he distributed them. And they were very beneficial for people to be able to fill out their Red Cross and their FEMA paperwork because it's the only way, and they're portable enough that they don't become a burden. So, yeah. Okay. Good questions. I talked to you about battery. This is in Hawaii, but these are called mega packs. And these are stacks and stacks and stacks of batteries used as storage because Hawaii has a lot of geothermal, they've got a lot of solar, a lot of wind. But even for an electric plant, this is the same thing they're using outside of Morro Bay, is these are just tons of batteries. And they're amazing. And they actually, because they can, for the power companies, they make money because they can sell electricity for more money at peak, and this way they have more peak supply. So these are all called megaplex. These are actually made down in Modesto. And you can see here's a single mega pack is what this, well, they're all kind of this one mega pack like this because this is the controller. But when they do them for this, they just do side by side. And they're all separated because yeah, they're batteries and people might shoot at them with guns and things like that. So the whole idea is this way there, if anything happens to one, it doesn't happen to all of them. But anyway, these mega packs, each mega pack can be on one semi, and then they come in pretty much assembled and then just go in the ground. So that's the mega packs, and those are and they have a 2-year backlog right now of people wanting to buy mega packs, and they're producing them like crazy. Their biggest stumbling block right now is finding enough trucks to ship them. Speaking of trucks, Tesla and other companies are building electric semis. Now, electric semis, first of all, a tremendous amount of CO2 and other noxious substances come from trucks. And you know, we need trucks. Trucks are our last mile delivery. Trucks get everything from our produce to our Amazon goods, things like that. But an electric truck, the advantage to an electric truck, so Pepsi has, I think they have 70 It's down in the Modesto facility, and they run the trucks between Sacramento and Modesto. So Pepsi, Frito-Lay have the prototypes of the Tesla semis, and it's already showing that they cost 30% less to operate by just using electricity. And they have 300 to 500-mile range, depending on which model you get. But 500-mile range is good. Still, for the truckers that drive across country that work in teams, it's not quite there for them yet because they need more than the 500-mile range until there's an infrastructure where they can charge the batteries quickly enough, like while they're eating dinner, because they're mandated. They can only drive so many hours in a day anyway. But if they're a team of drivers, they can split that between them. But Tesla is running, because this actually is what's called the Gigafactory. It was the first Gigafactory. This is in Sparks, Nevada. Over here on this end is Panasonic, and this is where they manufacture the batteries that are used in some of the Teslas. And then this is all the manufacturing of the battery packs and the motors. So Tesla is running semis from here down to the Fremont factory all the time, and they're using the semis now. This ground you see this picture is only a month old, and this is where they've broken ground to build the factory for the semi truck, and the semi truck will revolutionize it. And when we talk about full self-driving, self-driving of a truck on a prescribed route that could go from here to Fremont, they can roll that out fairly quickly, and it can be very, very safe. Anyway, this is what the Tesla Semi looks like. It's about the same price as regular semis, but your operation costs are at least 30% less. And they charge up fairly quick, but it uses a different charger. It's where the other chargers use 250 kilowatts, this thing can use 1,000 kilowatts.
Mhm.
So this is still in infancy. They have 70, I think. Well, Pepsi has 50 to 70, but then Tesla has about 50 themselves that they're constantly testing. And these guys going up the hill on Highway 80 do not have to slow down below the speed limit. You will never be held up by one of these. They can go the speed limit even if they're fully loaded. They have that much torque. And the batteries in these things will last a long time. And again, 300 to 500 miles range. So
What's weird is when you look up at them, the driver is not on the left-hand side like a normal vehicle. They're centered.
yeah, so and that's weird. And I've got to sit in one of these, luckily, not while I was moving, but you can barely see it. There's a guy right here in the center, and they have Teslas are known for having the screens. So to his right and to his left are two 15-inch screens, but he has a clear, unobstructed view down to here, and he can see so much of the road. But the center driving, the drivers say it takes them about 3 days to get used to it. But once they do, it's so much better because they can see out of each mirror equally. Now, I have to say, there's also a ton of cameras on these, and it does have the ability for self-driving, but the drivers really like it. And then what they're going to do when they start doing sleepers and stuff, they will make a sleeper cab back here. But having the two screens on there, what happens is one screen can be their complete navigation screen, and the other screen has everything that would be gauges. What's your tire pressure? What's the weight of the battery, the heat, and things like that. And so you really have this. The other big thing that's very beneficial, because it's always connected to the internet. With truckers, a big thing is logging what they do, because they're under very strict guidelines, and they're very, very monitored for the time they are on the road. And so this can report all that automatically, which takes a big burden off of them. But secondly, it's instantly accountable, which makes it good, because if they're when they're stopped, they're not necessarily on the driving clock, but they're still on the clock, and they're limited to so many hours per day because driver fatigue is a big issue. And believe it or not, as I find out with self-driving, once they're enabled on this, you become much less fatigued by letting it do the different things like that. So good point. So electric cars are really expensive, but you can lease a Model 3 for $299 a month. And actually, when you consider your gas savings, possible gas savings driving 12,000 miles a year over the term of the lease, it may be as low as 160. The other thing I want to point out is electric cars have zero maintenance. There is no maintenance involved at all. You don't need to do oil changes. You don't need to do anything like this. So this really bursts the bubble on electric cars are expensive. I think if I'm not mistaken, it's like $4,000 to initiate the lease. So the car itself, you can get in for right around 32 or something like that. I'm going to talk briefly about self-driving. I did in the past, but this is just kind of what the cameras see and everything else. And I'll tell you, it has improved dramatically with the AI. And the reason that is because the amount of miles that are driven. So even if someone doesn't have autopilot engaged, all the cameras and everything are still working. So it's gathering all that data. So in millions of miles, this is 3 billion miles that they've got. I think the next tab is a little bit better. So this is full self-driving in blue, and then the new version 12, which is artificial intelligence. You can see here they're up into almost 1.3 billions of miles driven with self-driving. And the part of the reason the regulators they've kind of stayed away from this is because the more right now it's proven that full self-driving has 4 times less accidents over millions of miles than regular human drivers. So in other words, the more people that drive with self-driving, the safer it'll become. So the incident rate is 4 times, it takes you go 4 times as far before you have an accident with self-driving than you do with the other. And obviously it's anecdotal on some of this. And then this is the big thing where Tesla, and this is what they're doing here, is this is what's called the compute power. They're buying these H100s from NVIDIA, and this is how many they have now versus they have 36,000, 38,000 of them. And they used to have 8,000. And that is the compute, not in the car. The computer in the car doesn't have to be super, it doesn't have to be a big deal because it's the computer that does the learning, and I'll put in some links about machine learning. So that's the big deal. All right. So any questions on that before I go into iPhoneography? Let me get my screen displayed from my phone. And we're going to do this, share. Linda, you've got a question. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'm not Linda. I borrowed my wife's iPad. Okay.
That's okay, as long as she knows it.
She knows it. Yeah. I was just curious, about electrical supply because one of my neighbors retired from Cal ISO, and he tells me that California has such a serious electrical shortage, no pun intended, that they have to buy electrical power from virtually all over the West, even as far east as Texas. So
Well, they can't get it. They can't get it from Texas because there's basically three grids in the U.S. There's east of the Mississippi, there's west of the Mississippi, and then Texas. Those are three separate grids. So what CalISO does, and they do a great job, they will go, let's say, on a peak summer day. And by the way, CalISO is right out in Folsom. That's where it's located.
Right.
And CalISO they take a small override on all electricity they manage. And what they'll do is they become the arbitrator of, if we have a hot summer day here in Sacramento, but let's say the coast is cool and they don't need as much power, they forecast and then they arrange to purchase that power from these other locations. The Northwest, they use more power in the winter than they do in the summer for the most part. And the Northwest has a lot of hydroelectric, so they have a lot of extra. But let's talk about electric cars specifically. And I mentioned it earlier, 98% of all charging of electric cars is done at night when people are sleeping. It's more convenient. You have a slow charger at your house or some apartment complexes and things. And like, for instance, my car, I have nearly 400 miles of range. So I could drive to the Bay Area and back every day, and I would never have to go to a supercharger during the day. I would plug my car in when I get home, and then it's better to charge at night because the rates are considerably lower. There is excess capacity at off-peak times. Peak time is from noon to 5, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And that's when it's the most expensive. Or no, it's actually 5 to 9. I guess it's 5 to 9 at night. It used to be earlier in the day because more businesses use power, but that's the idea: is people get home, they start cooking, they start doing their wash and things like that. So also the hottest part of the day is in the afternoon. So yes, I think that they're so what is going to help solve this is the battery storage for the power companies and other people, because since there is excess capacity at night, the more batteries you have, the more you can use those batteries to supplement your normal electric output during the day when there's peak demand. So, and the peak demand really happens when we're having to turn all our air conditioners on. The rest of the time, there's not these problems with brownouts and things like that. So feel free to chime in on that, Mr. Linda's iPad. And I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but yeah, I mean, is that, yeah, and you might ask your friend, because that seems to be what the industry is saying.
Yeah, I think well, not this past summer of 23, but 2022, that I remember them saying in the news, if you had an electric car, you might not want to charge it tonight because of the peak, was, and admittedly it was like a heat wave. And so they were, kind of all hands on deck, so to speak, and trying to beat the bushes for electricity. And I'm kind of thinking, well, if that's true, our state keeps pushing everything electric, electric power tools, electric car, and I don't see a whole lot of increase of electrical power generation other than, like you stated, the batteries. But that would take an awful lot of batteries, to replace that, I think.
Well, actually, if you think about it, so if we take my car, which has 100 kilowatt hour battery in it,
Okay.
and when I charge at night, I would have to say the average time I charge, when I was driving a lot of stuff, maybe I might only charge 30 kilowatts of that, because with the electric car, you charge it every night to whatever you're going to charge it to. and you're only having to put back in at whatever you use that day. So it's to think that you have to fully charge it, from 0 to 100. That's a rare case. Now, obviously, the supercommuters to get to the bay and back and things like that, that would be the case. But and everybody wants to charge during off peak because your electricity costs less. So you schedule the car can schedule when to charge. And in fact, with mine is scheduled to be charged to whatever level I say it should be by 6 a.m. and it'll figure out when to start. And it's rarely that it starts during peak time. So that should mitigate it a lot. But when you think about those mega packs, the one of those mega packs that would fit on a semi would satisfy of those batteries. Boy, I'd have to look at the wattage on them, but I would say it's probably closer to 200 cars. So I don't know. And in fact, so here's kind of the thing that towards the future. And again, the battery storage is only now just starting to proliferate a lot because a company like Tesla, if I can sell a car or I can sell a mega pack, but I'm constrained on batteries, I make more margin on a car. And so that was their thing. But now that there's enough, they can make mega packs like crazy. So it hasn't caught up with the mega packs yet, but the power companies see, and the other thing is, it's financially, the power companies love the batteries because they actually, whatever they spend on the batteries, they make more than that being able to sell the electricity that they can sell for during the peak. So, and those peaker plants are super expensive to run. And so it's financially important for them to do it. And the battery cost has dropped enough now, and it's going to continue to drop where you're going to see more and more and more battery, or actually you're not going to see that many, but even home storage is the same. So like a home storage battery, you wouldn't really charge your car from that because the home storage battery has 13 kilowatt hours of batteries in it. So you'd need 8 of them or so or 7 of them to be what a full charge of your car. But that's why when the grid has excess power at night, you charge the car. Texas at one point for businesses, I know that they had so much excess capacity at night that they would give any company that was using power at night would get free electricity because the power plant's going 100% anyway. And so what they were looking to do in that case is shift that to nighttime, and then they would use less power during the daytime.
Okay.
So, and a great point. I'm glad you brought it up, but I think and I have a feeling that dire, oh, you got to charge. The other thing that people always bring up, well, what happens when there's a power outage? Well, you can't pump gas if there's a power outage. Yeah. And what they're building, Tesla is building their charging stations now, so that most of them they're building with solar canopies, which make for shade. The solar at a charging station will never be enough to support a lot of charging at that charging station. But what they do is they're integrating batteries into it, especially because we know that there's outages that happen. So as they can get more and more batteries, the charging station will have solar and it will have batteries. And so therefore it can store a lot in those batteries. They did a thing up in Placerville where when they were having those wind outages that PG&E was doing, there's a charging station up in Placerville, and Tesla has 2 semi rigs that have batteries on them and charging, and they proactively sent them up there for that charging station, and they could charge 100 cars before they had to send it back down for the whole semi to get powered. So, that's and at the same time, when it's out, those gas stations, unless they have a generator, are not able to pump gas. So,
like a gas generator.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of them have natural gas generators and things, but those are just while the power is out. I mean, because otherwise, a gas station's a pretty critical thing. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some sort of mandate in the works where gas stations have to start doing that. But again, those outages are not as big as they were. So,
Well,
all right. Thank you. Good question. Barbara, go ahead, and then June.
Yeah, this is sort of related. Let's see if I can quite get this right. I read something recently about solar, and that so many people in California have now gone to solar on their houses that for some reason PG&E is finding that's cutting into their profits. And so I'm not sure what it is that they're planning on doing about that, but apparently there's some concern about continued use of solar as much. Have you heard anything about that, Ken?
Absolutely. I've heard a lot about it, and I've been very proactive on it.
So what's the
So,
deal?
well, the deal is, so you got to understand PG&E and Southern, what is it? San
Southern
Diego,
California gasoline.
yeah, Southern California Edison are complete total monopolies.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little political here, but
and they're not
nothing
regulated.
nothing I say is not truthful because I've researched this a lot. They are regulated, quote unquote, by the
Yeah.
CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, which is a very though they they're appointed by whoever's in governor at the time. And there's just think about, it's a monopoly, and their government, or their one person in the government's appointees. So, and a lot of the money that PG&E customers spend goes to lobbying and campaign financing for the governor. So there's a lot of, you follow the money on all this. Now, I'm a capitalist and I believe in free trade, but I don't believe in monopolies. And you take a look at Roseville, you take a look at SMUD, their rates are 1/3 to 1/5 of what those of us on PG&E have to pay. So it's not good. But what happened is the state of California mandated that all new homes had to have solar, and well, by the way, and so PG&E has to get their rates approved, their tariffs, they call it. Their rates are regulated or approved by the CPUC. And they did commercials and made sure it was well known that, wow, we're really not doing well on this, because what they do is they've had 3 versions of it. It's called net metering, NEM. I was very lucky, and I knew that NEM2 was coming, so I made sure my solar got in before NEM1 went away. Because what happens with my solar is, when I produce, I overproduce. I make more electricity in a year than I ever use, including using my car. So, I walk the walk. There's nobody, I'm not in the hole. I'm not taking any electricity. So I'm giving electricity away. And what I do is I sell it back to them. And at peak times, I can sell it to them, because that's when the sun's up and that's when their peak is. So therefore, they need that extra energy. So I become a power plant for PG&E, requiring them to not have to worry about depleting it. It only benefits them when they're having to use the peaker plants that much. So, but the whole idea was I get net metering. In other words, I get a credit to my bill by overproducing. So I pay no PG&E bill basically the entire year. But which is what I wanted, and that's why I built my system to overproduce. Then they went to NEM2, and they made it so there were tighter, you couldn't sell it back as beneficially as you could before. The latest is NEM3, and it's abysmal. It is, so my payoff time, because my rates are so high, my power bill used to be, my biggest power bill in June, while I was driving 2,800 miles a month driving with my electric car and my big electricity for my air conditioner, my biggest bill was 560 a month. okay, in June before I installed solar, and now I pay nothing. So that's a big effect. Now, my payoff was my break even on my solar was in less than 4.5 years.
Wow.
In NEM2, the payoff for solar creeped up to about 5 or 6 years. The current payoff in NEM3 is between 7 and 10 years. But I have to stress, and solar panels are guaranteed for 20 years for efficiency, but they'll last beyond that. And so if you can afford to do it, do it. Because now, if you're in SMUD, or if you're in Roseville Electric, it's less beneficial. Your break-even time is farther down the road because your electric rates are so good because they're not a mobbed up monopolistic utility, and they're owned by the ratepayers. So that's how the solar works, and you can still get credit for it. To go off grid is you've got to have a big system and you've got to have big batteries, and that's not what you're looking to do. What you're looking to do is with solar, ideally you would use the grid as your battery. In other words, like I don't have a home battery, I don't need one, because when I produce extra, I send that electricity to the grid, and then at night, when I'm no longer producing solar, or in the evening when the mine stops producing in the late afternoon, enough to compensate, I'm getting electricity back from the grid, but I never get back as much electricity as I gave. So therefore, that's how you can arbitrage that. So, and that's the other thing with the car is I can set the car to say, don't charge till midnight when the rates are lower. And then it'll just charge at midnight. So you can set that. Most cars will allow that. So did that answer that for you? And that was a bit of a rant, but I really just think it's criminal what PG&E gets away with.
Yes, as a PG&E customer down here, but a former SMUD customer, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, all right, June, go right ahead.
Okay. I'm a PG&E customer in Yolo County, West Sac, and I just bought a brand new HVAC because we decided we didn't want to do the solar. But I do want an electric car, and we don't drive much, maybe 8,000 miles a year, maybe 10.
Uh-huh.
You think it's going to cost too much money to have the car charged, get the electric car with PG&E?
As far as once you're driving it. So let's talk about, there's two components of charging your car at home. Well, there's actually three components. The first thing that you will fall in love with is the fact that you're never going to have to go to a gas station again and your hands won't smell. But if you go on a long trip, it takes a little longer. But what happens is, if you think about it, so you're driving, you said about 10,000 miles a year. So you probably get gas every 2 or 3 weeks. So I would say every month you're spending about 15 minutes of your life at Costco, at Sam's Club, wherever, and you're never going to get that time back. Whereas if you charge your electric car, you come home, it takes 10 seconds to plug it in, and you're never going to have to visit that gas station again. So if you drive to San Francisco and back, you might need a charge of, say, 15 minutes. So yes, in a long trip, if you do a lot of long trips, you might make up for that. But to be honest, it's not, in the scheme of things. But let's talk about your electric price, even with PG&E. I haven't calculated it recently, but generally speaking, charging from home on PG&E at 20 cents a kilowatt hour, I can do the math here really quick. Hang on. I think it's right now you should spend about 1/4 to 1/3 of what you would spend for gas, because you use about 300 watts per hour. So you get 3 miles for every kilowatt. And in 3 miles, that would cost you with PG&E about 20 cents. So 20 cents and versus your gas. I mean, it's amazingly less, and it'll take PG&E a long time to make up for that. Yes, obviously your electric bill will go up, but you will no longer have a gas bill from doing it. And and then if you travel, when you go out and you use the superchargers, if you're a long trip, it costs, well, here in Roseville, or in Roseville, you can get it for 31 cents, but I would say it's about 45 cents a kilowatt hour going around. So it's almost double what you'd pay at home, which means it's still pretty close to half of what you'd pay for gas. So it's, yeah, and there's no maintenance, and it's really easy. Now, the other part about that is your installation for your charger. If you're not driving a lot, you can get by with a regular 110. And then if that doesn't satisfy you, if you're going on a trip or something, it'll only charge the car at about 3 to 4 miles per every hour of charge, but because it charges it slow. It's a simple little 110 outlet. But if you install a 40 amp outlet and get a $300 charger, it will charge at 30 miles per every hour of charge. And obviously electricity costs the same, but that would completely charge your car overnight versus you figure you charge it for 10 hours, you're going to gain 30 miles or so like that. But that's the beauty of, if you got in a spot where you don't have enough charge and you all of a sudden want to go on a trip, you're going to LA or going to San Francisco or even to Tahoe, you can always stop by a supercharger and then fill it up if you don't have enough home charging. So, and it costs, depending on your location, it can cost from $300 to $1,000 to get your wiring to your garage if you need to do the better charging, and it's the one that charges overnight, but you already have a 110 outlet in your garage, and the thing they put in is just like a dryer outlet. So did that answer that for you, June? Okay.
Very good.
And actually, I'll tell you a huge consideration we haven't talked about is, and yes, I'm a Tesla fan, and yes, I know them well, but one of the main things that drove me to Tesla is their 4 models. Cybertruck hasn't been tested yet, but of the 4 models of the Teslas, they're the 4 safest cars ever built. And let me tell you how that comes about. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration does, they do crash testing. That's the 5-star you hear. And all the companies try to tweak their cars so they can all get 5-star ratings. So Subarus are very safe, Mercedes, etc. They all do well on the 5-star. And that's basically the crash worthiness of the car. But the insurance companies know better than anyone the true implications of a car wreck. So the Insurance Institute in the US and the European Insurance Institute, when they do their tests, they look at the impact to the occupants of the car, because the most expensive part of any car wreck is not fixing the car, it's fixing the humans that were in the car. And so therefore, when they do their tests, that's where they have the sophisticated dummies and everything else, so that they can see what kind of integrity to the cabin there is. And the 4 Tesla models are hands and feet above even Mercedes, Volvo, etc. in that. And they always get those ratings. And to me, that's very critical. There was a gentleman, well, I don't want to call him a gentleman, this father and husband driving a Model 3, I believe, on down 101, had some sort of psychotic episode, they're saying now. But he, with his children in the back seat and his wife in the passenger seat, they were from LA. He saw this turnout on Highway 101 with a 250-foot cliff, and he decided that he should launch the car off that to try kill himself and his family. Well, the best part is he didn't accomplish that. There were some injuries, but not very bad. And it's a testament to the fact that that Tesla Model 3 went down. And when they first saw the wreck, they saw, oh my gosh, had no, there were injuries, but the people got out of the car themselves and are doing fine now. And he's on trial at this point. So anyway, that's kind of an aside, but I wanted to point that out. All right. Great questions. And I'm always, you can always reach out to me and I can answer any other questions. So we're going to talk about iPhoneography. Oh, and in fact, you know what, Keith? I have Keith's information. And is Keith on today? Yeah, Keith's here. So let me get this email. Keith, I'm going to address it at the end here, and I like what you wrote. So the camera app, let me show you first of all, we all take photos. That's probably that, and internet and email is the three biggest things with the iPhone. The iPhone, the camera gets better and better all the time. There are some tricks to taking pictures, and the phone can do some remarkable things. I probably take 95% of all my pictures are taken with my iPhone now. Rarely, unless I need a long lens, do I take it with our regular camera. But let's go ahead and show you. I'm turning my screen dark, and it doesn't go dark with Zoom. So, there it does. So when you're faced with your home screen like this, you have this camera in the bottom right corner right here. And that's one way. If you press and hold it for a second, it comes up and it goes right to your camera. I'm going to go back and show you again another way to do this. Let me get rid of this. Okay. So if my screen's dark, I can tap the phone and I take my right finger and I take it off to the right side over here, off the bezel. And if I slide from right to left, I also get right to the camera. Okay. So again, when the phone's dark, you tap the screen and then you can press and just slightly hold a second the camera in the lower right, or put your finger off the edge of the phone and swipe from right to left, and you're in a camera. Now, the beauty of this is if the phone's locked, well, it won't be because I have Face ID, but let's say I'm going to turn my phone away from me. So my phone's locked, and you'll notice, oh, did it unlock? Good, no Face ID. So basically, my phone is locked right now. I'm having it not be turned towards my face. So if I press this button in the lower right, the camera comes up. But you'll notice right here, there are no photos. See? Because what I did is the screen was locked. And this would be if you gave it to a person. Why is it upside down? There we go. If we gave this to a person, you wouldn't want them. They're going to take a photo for you. So you wouldn't want them to be able to see all of your photos. So that's what that does with your locked screen. And the camera comes up longer. You don't have to unlock the phone and hand it to them and all that. It's not safe. And you know what? Do everybody a favor. Look around. When I'm traveling, I look for people. I see a couple, they might want a photo. Hey, would you like me to take your photo for you? And because the photo from the back of the camera is much better than it is from using the selfie. So anyway, and we'll go through that selfie and everything in a minute. But and then what I do is as I grab their phone from them, I say, oh man, I get more free phones this way. And I kind of act like I'm going to run off. And, it kind of puts them for a little bit of a burp at the beginning there. Anyway, so we're in the Photos app or in the Camera app, and I'll just unlock my phone and go to Camera. And what I'm going to show you is we're going to kind of go through the menu in a big circle. I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and we're going to go through these things. Excuse my messy desk there. So we're going to start at the far end, and you'll see it says time lapse. So with time lapse, this is where you can set it and it will take a picture at specific times. This is how you get that kind of slow motion, clouds are moving in, things like that. The other one is slow-mo. This is video. So a time lapse is essentially a video too. Whenever you're in video mode, the red, the normal dot where you touch it is red. Okay. So slow-mo, that's slow motion video, which means it's actually capturing quite a bit more, and then you can play it back as slow motion. There's another one we're not going to dive into too much detail in, but this is really neat. This is cinematic. It gives you that dramatic effect where you, if let's say you've got some people in a room and the one person closest to you is talking, it will know that that person's talking and it will focus on them and take everybody else out of focus. That's called bokeh, when the back is out of focus. Or when you, and Al is putting links up here all the time, which is great, and those will all be available afterwards. Or you can, when, if someone farther back in the room is talking, the camera in cinematic mode will focus on them, taking everybody else out of focus. It gives you that dramatic effect. So like a murder mystery or things like that, where they're in the police, or Inspector Clouseau is interviewing people that are in there. But believe it or not, you can always change that effect after the fact, which you can't do with regular cameras. Okay, the next one is regular video. And actually, you'll notice that this little thing shows up. This just means that we're focusing close by. If I focus farther away, you see it goes away. Hey, guess who that is? All right, so then we go to photo. This will be your most used. And remember, anything video-wise is got the red dot. So if you pick your phone up and you've got photo, or you've got a red dot, you know you're not in photo. So we're going to do a lot here in photo in a second, but I want to complete the carousel here and go to the next one, which is called portrait. And let me see if when I go over portrait, let me look here. I'll do this. Actually, here we go. This might work. Okay. There we go. So here's my camera from my computer. And you'll notice it says natural light. So I'm going to take this photo, and it's a little bit tough with the lighting. Let me try with the flash and see if it makes a difference. Okay. So now when I do this photo, I took this photo and I'm going to go to, which one's better? This one's probably better. So any photographer knows focal length. What focal length means is it's your depth of field. In other words, if I want this camera to be in focus in the front, but I don't want the stuff behind it to be in focus, I use a shallower depth of field. If I want everything to be in focus, I do a deeper depth of field. And what I can do is that if I hit edit, I'm hitting the edit button now. Again, I'll go down. Let me back out of that. I'm going to hit the edit right here. And I go here. And then you'll notice here it says depth. So it set this automatically. But what I want you to do is I'm going to slide this back and forth. And I want you to look at what happens to the stuff in the background. So if I go here, look at how they become more blurry. So that's like an f1.4. That's a very shallow depth of field. And if this were a person, that person would stand out more. If I go back and go this way, look at how everything is in focus now, because that's a higher depth of field. And in this case, it would be like an F16. And that doesn't lend itself to a great, that's just a good snapshot because everything's in focus. But realistically, if this was a person, I should have got a little model of something. But if we go here, you'll notice the camera has more prominence as we make the shallower depth of field. And actually, oh, you know, this is new. We can do a reverse bokeh. Oh my gosh, that's great news. So you'll notice how I tapped on right back here. I tapped, this is a clip for a light. And I tapped on it and it's in focus. And then I can still go everything in focus. But if I go here, if I go there, that'll be in focus. That's a little farther away. But if I want this in focus, let's say, everything else goes out of focus. And where you get there is, I'm going to cancel that, discard changes. You're using the portrait mode on the camera. Okay, so it's next to photo is portrait mode. And it can be very effective. The target of your thing has to be within you shouldn't be closer than 6 feet, and it should be around 6 feet. There are some other things you can do, other adjustments you can do, studio light and things like that. And I encourage you to really investigate it. So it's fantastic. And the last one is panorama. And panorama is very, very, very capable. But a panorama is never taken in upright mode like this. So I'm going to tilt my phone, and I'm sorry, you always take it in upright mode like this. The reason is we're going to be making a very wide photo. So I don't want to make it any shallower by doing it in that mode. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to press panorama. You can see the arrow indicates that I should be going this direction. And as I'm pivoting this direction, I try to keep this arrow along this line because it'll really make for a better picture. So we're going to start here, and we'll start here at the desk, and I'm moving it along. And it said slow down, and I'm coming here. I'm going along. That's a weird effect because that's the screen we're looking at. Then I go over here to my other screen. And then instead of pressing the button, I actually get to the end of my panorama. And then when I move back, it automatically stops taking it. A lot of people think you have to press the button. Now, if I want to do it the opposite direction, I tap on the arrow, and I would then start on the right-hand side, and then I'll do a pano this way. And you'll notice if I go up, see how, oh, I'm too tall. And if I go down, I'm going to mess this up a little bit because I want to have it not do the photo right. But if I go along the arrow and I come over here and go back. So again, you finish it and then you come back the other direction, and it senses that, and it will stop the photo. So let's look at these two photos. This is a panorama, and you can see there my up and down really threw it for a loss. Well, let's look at the one where I kept it fairly straight. Now you're going to get, this is called parallax or a fisheye view because of it's just too close. If you were farther away, you wouldn't get that. But if you'll notice, it blends. I'm in some very challenging light situations here, light off the monitors and things like that. So it does a great job with that. And you can always crop these and do whatever you want with them. Barbara, go ahead with a question. Unmute yourself. Or not.
Okay, now it finally unmuted. It wouldn't respond to my click. When you were in the portrait mode, I couldn't follow how you got to the depth of field down on the bottom, that little scale. How did you get to that?
Well, once you take the photo
Yeah,
you then edit it.
okay, got it.
So I'll show you that. In fact, I'm going to try to get a little better example of something I can. Let's see here. This is pretty challenging light. That's too close. Let me. Yeah, I think we'll come back to that, but I'm going to go back and show you. So we're in portrait mode. Well, here's my microphone, let's say. So that's not a bad one. So that's the microphone here. So you'll notice it became yellow. If I
Yes.
get too close to it, it's no longer yellow. When I get a little bit away, it becomes yellow. So we'll do this, and we'll actually put that little USB thing there. And let's get this out of the way because it's distracting. So if I go and I concentrate on that little USB stick, does it have an, nope, there's no sign on it. So I tap it and I'm going to say portrait mode. 2x is best. I'm going to do another one where I tap on that. And we'll do that. So I'll take the picture. I'm in yellow. I'm in portrait mode. Now, when I go in here and I edit the photo, I hit the edit right down here. And now you see it says, okay, f4.5. And that's kind of the middle ground. So let's slide this back and forth and show you the effect. See it because these are farther away, we're concentrating on this, and this is the most bokeh I can get. And bokeh is B-O-K-E-H. Now, with a very expensive camera, you can get bokeh like this if you shut it down to your smallest aperture and you use the long lens, you'll do this. But the fact is, you can't do anything after the fact. This is what's amazing about this. I can say, no, I wanted everything in focus. So I've moved it the other way, so everything's in focus. Now, there's where it recommends, but let's do this. Let me concentrate on the USB stick. And if you see, everything before and after it is out of focus. Now, I have the 15 Pro Max. You may not be able to get this two kind of bokeh like I'm showing here. So anyway, everything's in focus or just the USB stick. And it's, if you think about it, if this is a person and there's flowers in the background or a bunch of stuff in the background, it can really make that particular thing stand out. So
Great, thank you.
you're welcome. All right, so I think we got through the carousel. Oh, and by the way, when I'm in a photo like this, I'm here, I can do what I want and I can change the up here. But whenever you have this back arrow like that, it means you would get back to camera. But let's look here. So I can turn portrait off if I want also. Okay, so I'll go back to camera. And then we talked about pano. Now, I also want to point out here that on your screen, you will have numbers down here. This is the next. Oh, that's funny. So if you have a 15 Pro Max, you'll have a 0.5, a 1x, a 2x, and a 3x. Now,
5.
I'm sorry, a 5x. If you have a 14, it'll be a 3x. My mistake. Thanks, Bob. So the idea is that these are numbers of the optical lens. And when I say the optical lens, oh, I'm not seeing that. Can't see it from that. The optical lens means that there are actually 3 lenses built in, but these are optically with that. If you have a 15 Pro Max or Pro, 15 Pro, it'll have 3 lenses. And you actually have two more settings here. So this will only apply to people with 15 Pros. When I tap the 1X once, it's 28 millimeter or 1.2X. And the next one is 35 millimeter or 1.5X. And if I tap it again, it goes back to 1X. And those are optical zoom. Now, I know that a lot of people will go in and they'll take their fingers and spread them apart to zoom in like that, right? You don't want to do that because that's digital zoom. You can do that after the fact. See, because here it's at 5.6, it says, when realistically, I want it to be 5. Why is this? Hang on, we got off into turn the flash off. Somehow I got to video. I don't want to be in video. There we go. Photo. So again, 0.5 is wide angle, ultra wide angle. 1 is wide angle. And by the way, 1X on the Pro models gives you 48 megapixel photos. So there are much, much bigger, more pixel photos. And if I go to 2X and then 5X. And remember, as you zoom in, you have to think about this. As you zoom in, pretend like it's a camera that has a really long lens. Any type of movement is amplified because you're using a longer lens. So you have to be more stable with this. And the phone does have optical image stabilization. In other words, it can tell movement and sense movement, and it will try to make up for that. So far we've done the across the bottom. We've done this. This means macro is available, okay? Because I'm so close to something. Now, let's see. I'm not now. See, I'm farther away. Okay. Let's go across the top row up here. So the first thing is the flash. There are almost no instances where you would want to use the flash because the phone itself has such great low light capabilities that a flash will make it worse. And the reason for that is what happens is, let's say, and you've all seen it, you're at a concert or you're at a game and you're in this and you see the stadium and people are taking pictures of the people on stage or on the baseball diamond and they've got their flash on. Well, the flash is only good for about 3 feet. So while it does is it ruins the whole rest of the picture because your flash, being that it only really shows and does well for 3 feet, the phone camera is expecting, oh, I'm going to have this thing lit so I don't need to worry about my low light sensitivity. And it takes you just get a terrible photo. So you should turn your flash off and leave it off. And there are very rare circumstances. If you're photographing someone close up, a flash will help, but it's what's called a fill flash. It fills what's going on. The other time is if you have somebody where you have a very bright background, they're wearing a baseball cap and you can't really see them, it will help with that regard. But the rest of the time, the flash should not be used because the low light sensitivity is so good. So right now, next to it, it kind of comes and goes, is this little thing here. We're going to explain that in a second because it's got more to it. Then over here, HEIF, because I'm on number 1. If I put it on 2 and on 5, HEIF, it's high efficiency image format. And what that is a special way to get very high quality images in a smaller format. If I tap it, it turns it off. And now I'm only shooting at 24 pixels at number one rather than 48. So it saves your file space a little bit. And the one over here is live photos. And I'm not a big fan of live photos, but there's some instances where live photos can be remarkable. And when I go into my photo library, I'll show you a few in a minute. But live photos captures, I forget exactly what it is. I think it's a half second before and a half second afterwards. So let's say you're trying to get a picture of 5 people jumping and you want to make sure you get everybody with their feet off the ground. You would take a live photo. And once you take a live photo, you can go into that photo and you can determine, oops, my mistake. You can determine which of the photos you want of that live photo. It'll usually pick the best one. So, and there it is live. So now I could go through and I can pick whichever one I want. And then it discards after a certain amount of time the ones you don't need. So that's live photo. Now, another place you can use live photo is what's called long exposure. For instance, we have all seen pictures of waterfalls that look very soft and mystical. Well, that's done with usually about a 1-second exposure. And that makes the water very soft. And we'll show some photos of that in a little bit. That's a long exposure would be good for that. You can also use it many times if you're like taking pictures of a lake with a reflection and there's little ripples in the lake and you want to get them out, you can do what's called long exposure too. And you do that by taking a live photo and then making it long exposure. Now, in this case, I didn't do a waterfall, so all it does is make it blurry. But that's how that works. Randy, go ahead with your question.
Yes, I'm back on the HEIF, the previous one before live photo. Mine
Right.
have it set and it says it gives me the option of RAW. On my camera setting, I see where I would do that. Most likely it would be the high efficiency, which I've not checked. I have mine set on most compatible, and I have
Let me
shows up.
hang on. Let me get to there and we can talk about it and you can talk more on that. So everybody you can go to settings. Now, this doesn't apply. I think it might only apply to the pro cameras. But anyway, if you tap settings and go to, you can just search under camera, and you come on down here to formats. So it's settings, camera, formats. So HEIF is high efficiency format, okay? And what that means is you get a big picture and it's less compatible. So if you're sending it to somebody, it'll probably send it out as more compatible. And the other one is, now this is interesting because, oh yeah. So you can be in 24 or 12. In other words, the megapixels is your file size. So a 2 megapixel would be 12 meg or 2 megabyte. I'm sorry, a 12 megapixel picture is 2 megabytes. A 24 megapixel is 3 megabytes. But remember, if you use the number 1 lens, it can be 48 megapixels. Now, down here is where your Pro RAW is. So you have Pro RAW and resolution control. And Al will probably put some links in here because there's a pretty deep dive on this. But if you hit HEIF, you can do HEIF Max, gives you smaller file size. It's a compression. You can use Pro RAW 12 or Pro RAW Max, which means up to 48 megapixels for the 1X camera. But here's where it really comes down to play. So the 248s. So 48 in HEIF is only a 5 MB file. If you're using ProRAW, a 48 megapixel file will be 75 megabytes. So that's what, 7, that's a lot bigger. And then if you use the ProRAW and you only use the 12 megabytes, it's 25. So the file size is dramatically different, but HEIF is it's a form of compression that is pretty good about not losing stuff. If you are doing photos that you want to do a lot of work with, and you're going to maybe blow them up later, you would want to go ProRAW Max for those, but I don't recommend keeping it on, because when you're taking a picture of a price tag at Costco, that's probably not going to be what you need.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers it for you. And then there's Apple ProRes down here. This is for video. And that's just, and then that's actually if you're doing videography, ProRes is something that all the high-end cameras do, and it's amazing the footage you can get out of it. And the last one is you can record video where your recording will use the spatial video, which is done on the Vision Pro. Okay, let's get back to the camera settings. So again, we're on the top row, and the last one we talked about was live over here. So you'll notice this little caret, I call it. And if I tap it and go down, there we go. So it brings out this menu tray here. Now the first in the menu tray, so again, it's this little arrow at the top, this caret. You tap it one way or tap it the other. This exposes it. So if we go and I go down here, the first one is the flash. That's what the lightning bolt is. And when I tap that, I can have it be automatic, on, or off. Off is what you want by default. Okay. So if you do off, you still have the option of turning it on right up here at the top if you need it. And it turns it on to auto. But you do not need the flash. Flash will ruin more photos than it will help. Okay, so then I'll tap off of that. This next one is very interesting. This is night mode. And I'm going to take and I'm putting my hand over my camera to make it darker. So you'll notice all of a sudden this became yellow up here, and this is available. If I close that window, it's still available up here. And I can tap it to say, no, don't do that, or do this. And what this means is, right now with this very low light situation, it says if we take this shot, it's going to be 3 seconds. So that means it's a long exposure to capture more light if you're at night and you're trying to shoot the stars or things like that. But what happens is if I hit this triangle, the caret, not a triangle, and I tap down here, I now expose, automatic is 3 seconds, but I can set my length of exposure from off to a max of 10 seconds. And 10 seconds will give you a lot more a lot more light. But the problem is if you're moving the phone at all, you'll get this light, but it'll all be blurry. Now, if my phone were mounted on a tripod, and actually, let me try doing this. I'm going to put something in front of this. It's dark enough. And I'm going to set the phone down. Let's see if I can get it set. All right, fantastic. So because I have the phone set with it's being stabilized as if it was in a tripod, my maximum now is 30 seconds. And the beauty of that is I can take this photo, it will be a 30-second exposure, and I've actually captured the Milky Way. So only the phone senses that it's completely stable. So if I rock the phone a little and I move it, see, my max is 10 seconds now. Oh, it went back to 30 because it's stable. So it's on a tripod. It could do it. Or, as I'll show you in a little bit, if I use my watch to interact with it and it's just on a table pointing up, it would do it. So again, this makes you for longer night shots is what that is. So usually 3 seconds to 10 seconds. Okay. I'll turn that off for right now. Now the next one is the live photo, okay? Which you can leave it on auto, on, or off. I leave mine off, but I can still tap up here and turn it on for a photo, okay? You don't use that in video, it's only for single photos, okay? So that's that one. The next one's really interesting, and let me get some things with color here. So I've got a little rag. And if I tap this, these are filters. Now, I've got a little bit of red and a little bit of green. So you'll see I'm on standard. Now, if I swipe from right to left, I have rich contrast. And if I go farther, it adjusts the rich, cool color. I can adjust the colors of what's going on and the deepness of the colors. Like here's standard, and see how much, notice the red in the pin a little bit. Doesn't really do it. Let me see if I can get, if the rain's not too bad here. Let's do out here through my blinds. Let's do their standard. You notice rich contrast a little bit better. It really works with much more color like flowers and stuff and sunsets. But that's what that particular thing is. So, and you can turn it on and off. The phone kind of overcompensates with it now, so I keep it off most of the time. So now the next one is right here, and that was filters, by the way. The next one here is 4:3. So this is the format of what you want. So you can do 4:3, which is pretty standard, 16:9, which is like video, but also what your computer screen is usually, and square, which is what it is. That's the resolution for that. And then you can adjust the square, and then 4:3, and then 16:9. You can see it's much longer. So when I go to, and again, that's this button right here. And we'll go back to 4:3 because that's the standard. The next one to it, it's exposure compensation. This is actually a new button where you can bias the exposure. And I'm going to show you a different way to do that in just a minute. But basically, it allows you to kind of, if you're in a situation where you're getting too much light, but it hasn't adjusted for it, you can do this plus or minus, and that's just right here on the right. And there appears to be more. Oh yeah, okay. So this is the self timer. So if you're going to do a photo in a group and you want to put your photo on a tripod and have it facing the group, if you do 10 seconds, you can click that and then go run and get back to your position and do that. Or 3 seconds. A lot of times 3 seconds is good because you can stabilize. That's all done under this timer. And the last one I never use is an actual filter, because you can apply these filters after the fact. So, but you can see how it changes the color of stuff. So I don't recommend filtering because you can do it there. Also in the lower right button says, well, let me get rid of this. So all I do to hide that is, again, I press the little caret at the top and we can hide it. Keith, go ahead with your question.
Is this exposure compensation feature only
Yeah.
available on the iPhone 15? Because I don't have it on the 14.
You know, I think because it was new to me and I didn't know it was there, but I'm going to show how you can do exposure compensation in a picture in just a second. But yeah, that was new to me that it was on there. So
Okay, thank you.
I believe it is. Okay, so then of course, and I forgot the little button down here, which is the selfie button. So hello, that's the selfie button. Always do your photos from up high, shooting down. But anyway, that's it kind of for the face of the phone. But now I want to talk to you about photography. And let's do it. I'm going to have some examples here with my microphone, and I'll put my yellow towel right there. Perfect. So when I'm getting ready to take a photo, once I've set everything else, there's challenging lighting situations, you know. What do I have here? I've got to close that because it brightens up everything too much. Okay, so when I tap something, so here's some challenging light here. So here is, when I tap this over here, it adjusts. When I tap this, you'll notice how everything's adjusting. If I go to something here in the dark, it'll brighten other things up. Let me get let's do this. That's going to be pretty bright. Yeah. So if I tap this, it darkens everything. If I come down here to the lower right and I'll tap over here, you notice how it made this so you can see it better, but it completely blew this out. Okay. So the idea is this is doing your exposure and it's doing your focus. But there's a little trick you can do. Let me go ahead and press and hold right here. And when I hold it, you saw it flashed. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it right where the name is. I press and hold and it flashes. And you'll notice it says automatic exposure, automatic focus, lock. So that means if I move it over here, you can see how brightly blown out everything is. And of course, it's not even in focus because they're different distances. So that's how you can accommodate light and dark settings. Let's do it. And we're going to autofocus on this and auto exposure. Now you can see how dark everything is down here. And sometimes that's beneficial. So what I'm doing is I'm locking it in, but then I'm coming down here. But I want to show you a little trick, and I'm going to get it into a dark area. You'll notice this little sun right here. Okay? That is how you can change your exposure. So I don't know. Oh, I see why. Turn that off. Turn off that. There we go. So when I slide it, oops, let me do it back again. Hang on. I want to go here. So now you can see it's dark. If I take this and I slide it up, see how it's getting brighter? If I take that sun and drag it down, and you have to drag it a few times, I'm getting it really dark, but it also makes this better exposure. So you can, once you've done it, you can set it and adjust it. And this is very, very helpful if you're doing a sunset or things like that. And I want to point out that I don't have to just lock it. If I just tap, for instance, if I just tap here, it's going to hold, but then I can, if I tap once, I can still do the adjustment. Okay. See how dark that is? And your photo, it's better if it's darker, because when you take photos, if it's too bright, you'll never be able to get those things. You can see how blown out that is. Okay, it went up. Actually, I'll press and hold. If you completely blow out the light, you'll never get that back. But I'm going to show you how, if I take something and make it too dark, I'm going to darken it. Okay, so that looks pretty dark. So I'm going to take that photo. Now, if I take that photo and I go to edit it, I can go here to exposure and look at what I can do to bring that back out. But if I take a photo and it's blown out too bright, I'll make that too bright. There, that's pretty bright. I'll take that photo. I can never get the blown out stuff back. It just really is tough. You lose a lot of what's going on. It creates a lot of noise. So better to underexpose than overexpose. Oh, and then edit screen is next. So hopefully you guys got that, because it's really pretty pivotal in photo, iPhone photography. The other thing is I have some things. Well, first of all, the line. Well, let's go to a dark screen. That shows that I'm keeping the camera level. When it goes yellow, it's level. And then I have this grid on here that's called the rule of thirds. And that's what a lot of photographers have. But the level is really a good thing. And I love that because I can go, boom, okay, I'm level. And then when I'm setting it on a tripod or something else, it does that. Back to editing the photos. So if we take this picture here, there's a carousel. The first one is the magic wand. The magic wand is a great fix for everything, and you can adjust the intensity of it. You'll see it notice as it pulls out more stuff on the desk. I'm going to turn the magic wand back off. The next one is exposure. And when I'm editing a photo, I go from one extreme to the other, and then I figure out where's my middle ground. Okay. So then I can also do brilliance, which is really, you'll notice it just tweaks the more brilliant parts of it. And all of these are things you can do all of this after the fact in the photos program too, which is what I'm doing here. Highlights. Another thing you can do, shadows. So the nice thing is, let's go back to exposure. So I'm going to bring things out of the shadows. Let's go back and change our exposure a little bit so it's a little darker. I should actually, I'm gonna undo these. I'm gonna hit cancel and discard changes. So I'm gonna go back and edit, and I'm gonna use exposure, and I'm gonna make it a little dark like that. So then I'm gonna go to shadows, and I'm going to bring the lighter stuff that's in the shadows back out. And you'll notice it doesn't blow out my other stuff. And the other thing is you can go here. There's contrast, brightness, that's overall brightness, black point, but the ones I want to point out here is saturation. So look at the blue in the left and the upper, and look at the pin, and we can increase the color. Look at the difference. Again, go to extremes. That's pretty much no color, and that's overemphasizing the color. That's color we didn't see because that, of course, is a white wall in the background. But saturation works really, really well. And then vibrance makes it a little more vibrant without boosting the color so much. Warmth, that's going from a warm yellowish color to a cooler bluish color. Tint, some of these you just got to work with. And then sharpness, definition, and vignetting, which is where it comes in from the side. I do want to show you crop. Filters, again, I don't encourage filter use. You can have all these built-in filters. Luckily, they're removable if you do it after the fact, not when you take the photo. So if we're in crop mode, well, there's actually a new thing if I take the photo and I zoom in, it now asks me if I want to crop it to that size. You'll notice right up here. And then if I go here and I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to hit crop, I can just crop out what I want, bring it down, bring it in, can do whatever you want for cropping. And you'll notice you have some things in here. This is to correct for lens aberration. So if I tap that, oh no, excuse me, that's regular flip. This is if you want to rotate it. This is if you want to use a certain setting for square, original, whatever. This is markup. And markup is where you take a pen, let's say, and you can mark it up like that. Hit cancel. And then there's other ones here where you can open it up in other apps. We'll get rid of that. Then let's see, go back to the main crop. Edit and crop. And this is where you have straighten. And right down here, that's called straighten. And when I tap it, you'll see it goes and says straighten. And now I can adjust it. Let's say you weren't perfectly right. The next one is the vertical. So what you're doing here is, you'll notice how it, if you weren't quite on it and you weren't flush with it, you can move it in or out. And the last one is horizontal. This helps with both directions. Just trying to get your photo just right. And this is all called computational photography. So if you have iCloud Photo Library on, obviously it goes up to the cloud and you're able to edit the photos in Photos, which has a few more things than this. Keith, go ahead with your question.
I want to go back to what you clicked on where you had the little yellow tag that said AE lock, AF lock.
Sure.
And so that locked the exposure and the focus. If
Correct.
you can adjust that little sun's picture of the sun up and down, you change the exposure. But that
Correct.
doesn't change the focus lock. So you can move it to some other place and still be focused on the thing you focused on originally. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So that's
Okay.
the beauty of it is when you first instigate it, you're going to do, and this is a bright screen, so I'll do this, press and hold, and then it pulses. And now when I go down here, you'll see this is much darker than it was. So I could adjust.
The exposure.
Yeah, and it's actually not going to adjust that much because it's a pretty extreme case here. But that was a very extreme case, but you can see it does it. But your focus is still locked.
On where it was when you first clicked the button. Okay.
Correct. Correct. And that's where it starts with its automatic exposure too.
And
Right?
you,
Right. So the camera app again is just so useful. I generally take them off and put them into my computer. And this brings up a really quick thing that Keith has put on here. He mentioned that he takes his iPhone images in Apple RAW, so they're big, and then they're much better to work with because RAW, there's a lot more data in the photo. You can pull stuff out of it, but then you upload them to the iCloud. So how it works is your phone is probably set up to optimize it so it does not keep the full-size photo on your phone. It sends the full-size photo up to the iCloud, and then if you go work on the photo, it will bring it down. But this way you get it to your other devices. You treat it, you upload it, he images, he puts it on his studio, and then he uses Lightroom. and which is great if you're an Adobe fan and you want to use Lightroom. And if you haven't used Photos in a while, Photos is become very, very capable. I use Luminar. I think Luminar by Skyloom is very, very good. They've always been a good Mac person. I have a problem with Adobe myself person, but doesn't mean you shouldn't explore it. Lightroom is very, very capable. Oh, and then Keith talks about using a gimbal. Yeah, you know, the phone has a great ability to steady itself, but they have these gimbals now. They're by a lot of different companies. DJI makes good ones. It's the same technology they use in the drone, is that the phone it stays because of a gimbal effect, which is essentially a flywheel effect. The phone, you're moving your hand around and everything, but the phone stays right on track. It stays level, and it really deadens. It's almost like these steady cams that you see people with, and it's very, very good. So let's see. Yeah, and there's lots of gimbals out there. There's great ones. And the iPhone itself in video mode uh, does a great job of image stabilization also. It's really, 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 really good. So before I very briefly go through travel, are there any questions on photography here as we do this? And, you know, go manage your library. But remember, if you have iCloud Library on, if you delete a photo in one place, it's going to delete it everywhere. Keith, go ahead with your question.
Going back to what you talked about with the panoramas, I think the iPhone panorama mode is really, really good. If you're trying to take a picture of a wide scene, like you're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon or something, to try and do that with a normal camera, you have to mount the camera on a tripod and level it, and then take a series of pictures from right to left, and then merge them later in another application. And the iPhone does all that automatically just by moving it and following along from left to right along this arrow. And it does the whole thing all at once. And I think that's amazing.
And the trick to the success is, and it's even gotten better in these other programs, is the fact that it's getting the lighting correct. And I'm going to actually, while we're on panorama, I'm going to pull up a panorama, a couple panoramas here on my, there we go. Let me share my screen. So here are some panoramas. This was actually recently at White Sands. Oh, here were the two panoramas we just did. Panorama. Now, I want to point out one thing. I have done, oh, this is Stonehenge 2. This was on the way to the eclipse. These are just wildflowers. This is the sea in Death Valley that's a dry lake bed. Well, it's no longer dry. But here's the other one, vertical panoramas. Now, when I show these on the phone, they're vertical. They don't show it here like this. But the beauty of it is, let me get one of my good ones. So a vertical panorama is where you would hold the phone sideways and you take it going up. So don't forget you can do vertical panoramas. Like this one. This was a fresco. You know, great way to get ones like this. They are all kind of distorted. And actually, it's doing a really good job now. If somebody is moving, it will try stabilize them in one of the shots. So, oh, this was inside a cavern. This was in Vietnam. Oh, and this Singapore. Oh, and here, see, it kind of chopped this car up. So what I would do is I would go use the app and get rid of the car, which you can do with retouch. I think I have. Oh, this was the Indy 500. That was a year ago. I was there at the Indy 500. Panoramas were really good for it. In the museum, a panorama. This is right nearby. This is up in Nevada City. It's Ananda Gardens up there. Oh, this is in Patagonia. This is Torre del Paine. And this was a wonderful morning. That was the moon. All over Patagonia. So panoramas, I'll tell you, they do a killer job. Now, I'm going to show you, we talked about long exposure. So I want to give an example of long exposure, and here we go. Here's Japan. So if I take this photo, and I took this as a live photo, as you can see. Did you guys see the water moving?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be it, but I've made it a long exposure, and you see how it softens the water. I'll show you another one from Morocco. Well, in this case, it worked out real well to soften these waves. This was Iceland. Oh, here we go. So this one, this water had little ripples in it because it was a little windy. Now, the long exposure made it here so it's not sharp, but what it did is it smoothed this water out. And so that's using live photo and then turning it into long exposure. And by the way, this is in Jordan near Aqaba, and this is Israel on the other side there. And that's the Red Sea. So a couple of portrait ones. I have a good example that I've had. I took on a guy's boat. Where is it? Oh, here's a decent example of good example of something up close with the background in portrait mode taken out. Cactus here in Arizona. So use all those tools. They're great. I don't have much of the way of screenshots or videos. Looking for one particular one. This was one, the ornament's in focus and the rest is not. That was in Austria. Oh, and there's Pete's wedding. You guys know Pete.
He wore shorts to his wedding.
Of course.
That was a reception.
Yeah, that was the reception because they had the wedding back there. Yeah. Thanks, Al. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is an example here where this is in focus and this isn't. The power, as I always say, it turns snapshots into photographs, and it really is very cool. A thing like this, it really accents this, but leaves all the rest of it out. Play with portrait. Again, it has to show up as yellow when it does it, and it's just remarkable. All right. Barbara, got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I had an emergency here, I had to go out. Did you talk at all about taking macro photographs? And if I missed it, I'm sorry, but I only
No,
have.
you didn't miss anything because I didn't talk about it.
Okay.
Macro photographs, you guys, the phone, it's best to keep it on auto mode. And when you zoom in to when you get close to something at a certain point, it turns into macro mode. And a macro photo, because it's very hard to capture things up close like this. And then the macro will do a good job. And then in this case, I used portrait because I wanted everything else not like that. And I can go in, and if I edit, let me see here. Oh, I want to show you this. These were some of the other features. So there's called stage light. There's normal natural light. So this would be portrait mode where we're seeing just the bokeh effect. But then you can choose different ones. And this one works well for this, where it's called stage light, where you'll notice it's just brightening what's there. And that's just a filter applied after the fact, but it has to be taken in portrait mode to do that. Okay.
That's beautiful.
Go ahead. Was there a question there?
I just said that's
Anybody?
beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I'm pretty lucky. All right, let's go to Keynote quickly. I just want to briefly, we'll do the travel thing super quick. Basically, of course, that was our trip. Are you ready to go? Yeah, well, I'll tell you, everything's really crowded these days. Definitely AirTags are the ticket. They're wonderful. I put them in. You should surreptitiously put them in your bags because you don't want people to get your bag and find it right away. AirTags are fantastic. The batteries last a year. I just replaced one in my camera bag. I hide them down in there and I label my bag different things, and then you can track it. For doing stuff in the US, in the national parks, I'm going to be doing the Great Race this year in June, goes from Kentucky to Maine, and I'll be using this to go through Acadia National Park. It is, unfortunately, I didn't update the slide. It is now called Guide Along, is the new Gypsy Guide, and it's wonderful. I know Keith uses it. So it's fantastic. The other one is called Here is now changed to Autio. Kevin Costner and then a guy I know are one of three partners in this. And basically, it uses information around you. I use this on the trip to Texas as I'm driving along. It will tell me interesting facts and historical facts about the areas that you're traveling nearby. It's not like the other one where it shows you scenic bypoints and things like this. This just describes where you're doing. If you're using any electric car at all, use a better route planner. It is fantastic for planning your trips and your stops. I'll send these links at the end here to you, Al. You can always go to my website at kenspencer.com, click on travel. Yeah, difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. This is on the website, so you can go to there and you'll be able to click on the keynote presentation or the travel PDF links that I have at kenspencer.com. This is appropriate. I was going the 1-day Inca Trail. They call it the 2-day Inca Trail up to Machu Picchu. So the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Machu Picchu, my number one thing on my bucket list, and I was so happy, and I'm so glad there were clouds. And one day I had rain. And when you're traveling, do the local culture. These things are beetle larvae that have been cooked, and they are some of the best things I've ever had. And I was the first one in our group that would eat it. Nobody else would eat it. It tasted like buttered lobster, and they're a delicacy there. Now, they do have the live version of it, but I didn't partake in that. I asked the guide. He says, no, it doesn't taste as good. But it was so good, there were still 2 of them left on the skewer, and I went back and had one of them, and it was good. But you know what? You really have to immerse yourself when you're traveling. So the Google Flights, it is the best for doing flights. I had an alert on mine. I'm going to Sri Lanka in September, and I was able to save $2,500 on my flight because I had an alert on my flight. And when it came up, I was able to get it. And so Kayak does a good job with alerts also, but I really love it. The other thing I do now, I don't ever really book through them, but Rome to the number 2 Rio. Rome to Rio has an app, and they have a phone thing. So what I'll do is, for instance, I need to go from Augusta, Maine to Boston because I'm going to be flying out of Boston. I'm going to be lucky enough to see the 4th of July fireworks while I'm in Boston. But I needed to know the best way to get there. And then Rome to Rio will show me that. And then I make arrangements, whether it be taxi, whether it be bus, whether it be train. Use this all over Europe, and it's fantastic. Lonely Planet guides are online. I a lot of times will just say, lonelyplanet.com, what's the best weather months for Sri Lanka or something like that. And it's fantastic. And they have some books. You should always have informed delivery. By the way, I'm going to be next year going on a 3-month round the world trip, and informed delivery will help on that. But when you stop your mail and hold your mail online, they only let you do it for 30 days. Well, I've kind of worked around that a bit, but my local postmaster will keep my mail longer. So check with your local postal service on that. And this is the kind of thing you get with to let you know what mail is coming to your box that day. Doesn't always make it that day. I implore you, the lines are worse than ever. Get TSA pre or global entry. It really is helpful. You can get the clear to global entry. You end up getting the same as TSA pre included with it, but it's for international.
Get your real ID also.
Yeah, get your real ID also. Yeah, that's for domestic. The other thing is that with global entry, it makes it so easy. But for TSA pre and global entry, many of the travel credit cards will give you, they'll pay for it. So, and then there's one for Canada that gives you the TSA pre and global entry, and it's Nexus, but you have to get it at Canadian US airport when you're transiting across. It's less money, but if you are in travels to do that, that is another alternative that's quite good. It's made primarily for Canada to the US, but it opens up everything else for you. Passport renewals, they're actually catching up on it. It's not too bad now. Most international locations require that you can't enter the city or enter the country if you have less than 6 months left on your passport. That's really, really, really important. This is one of the tips that has helped me, and everybody I've told it to thinks it works great. I heard it from a flight attendant years ago. When you're getting ready to leave the night before, take the pair of shoes you're going to wear and put one of those shoes in or in front or at the safe. Because when you go to you're in a rush, you slept in, unfortunately, you're getting ready to go, you'll inevitably forget stuff in the safe. So you put the shoe you're going to wear, one of them, in the safe or right next to the safe. And I guarantee you're not going to leave without checking the safe. Another little travel tip. When I went to Jordan, Morocco, Jordan, and Egypt was when the MacBook Pro 14 and 16 had come out just before it. And I held off buying it. I wanted a 16. I was sure I wanted a 16-inch, but it would have come while I was gone, so I didn't order it. When I got back, I had taken a 13-inch MacBook Pro with me, and it fit in almost all the safes. But if I'd had the 16-inch, it wouldn't have. So I changed my mind to not get the 16-inch, and I'm super happy I got the 14-inch. So you have to consider that because the safety of it. For goods like that, though, there's 2 other things you can do that is a huge thing. I look for a place in the room that is way above eye level, above a cabinet or something like that, where people can't see it. If I don't have a safe, it'll fit in. I put my MacBook Pro and my iPad up there. I look for sometimes the refrigerator, the small little fridge is inside a cabinet, and there's a little spot between the top of the fridge and the cabinet you can fit stuff in. Between the mattress and the box spring, things like that. But I also have another thing I travel with that hangs up on a hanger, and it's got pockets in it. And what you do is you just hang that, you put your iPad in there, whatever you want, and then you just put a shirt around it that you're hanging on the hanger, and nobody's going to steal your clothes. They're looking for other stuff. So that thing works really well. If you insure your trip, I recommend if you take more than one trip a year, you should always get annual trip insurance. Insure My Trip just shops that for you. They're not an insurance agency. Allianz is the one that I use, but actually I don't use it now because my Chase Sapphire Reserve card gives me fantastic insurance coverage. It is expensive, but it ends up being free. It's $550 a year, but the first $300 you spend on any kind of travel every year, the first $300 gets credited right off your account. So now the card only costs $250, and $250 is less than what I paid for trip insurance. But this also gives me lounge access and primary coverage on rental cars. There's some huge advantages to that. Anybody wants to contact me, I'll put a link in a referral link in there, because right now you'll get 75,000 free miles if you sign up. So I'll get all these links to Al. And and this is, 20 years from now, you'll be disappointed by things you didn't do, then more disappointed the ones you didn't do by the ones you did do. This is Mesa Arch in Canyonlands by Moab, and you get up at 3:30 in the morning and go do sunrise through the arch. And have fun when you're there. I mean, Thailand, the elephants, it's such a neat experience. And they need the mahouts, and the elephants need the support, because the elephants are no longer able to haul teak. They can't cut teak wood anymore. So these elephants are going to starve or be killed because the mahouts can't afford to feed them. And so support them if you can. The elephants are wonderful in these places like this. They're free to roam. He has the chain around his neck, but it's not tied up to anything. They could leave at night whenever they want. They only do stuff till 2:30, and then they get the rest the rest of the day. And at 40 years old, they are completely retired and taken care of all the rest of their lives. So get a good bag. That's an Osprey backpack. Scotty vest, man, it's the best thing. I put as I get out of my car at the airport and I'm going into the airport, I take my Apple Watch off. I take everything out of my pockets. I put it in a zippered pocket, and then I just put the Scotty vest in the tray to go through, and I have nothing in it. And I leave it in the zippered pockets because you don't want to lose anything on the plane. So I just keep my Scotty vest like that, and it works great. It's super small. Keep a poncho like this. They're not high tech. This is a plastic belt. You wear a plastic belt so you don't have to get caught by TSA. And then I get the one with a big zipper in it, and I can hide money in the thing. It is not large enough to fit credit cards. Oh, and by the way, take extra straps, because extra straps you might need to, your suitcase might break, anything like that. I always take 3 or 4 extra just straps. And that way too, if you forget your belt, it can work as a belt also. Use collapsible water bottles, carry your water in there, do that. Vaseline is wonderful because your nostrils all dry out. Vaseline or air, the nasal gel, they do make a spray. I don't like the spray. And a leash for your phone is super important. So this is a wrist leash, but I take this wrist leash and I hook it to something that's around my neck. I use PackSafe. I have a neck pouch that's got a cable inside it, and I put it on that because this way you don't have to worry about, first of all, dropping your phone, getting your phone stolen, but you're leaning over a railing on a bridge and things. Your phone is everything, and these are fantastic. You can get a waterproof case, and I really love the neck pouches. Keep your passport, your money, and your stuff in. You can download Amazon and Netflix to your iPad or your iPhone and take them with you. If you get YouTube Premiere, you can do the same thing there. And when you're doing a rental car, take a picture before or a video, because then it's both location and time stamped. Because when you turn it back, you turned it back good, and this is how they're going to say you turned it back. So you take a picture on both ends or a video of your rental car, and then you have proof that you didn't do that. So Uber, all around, Lyft not so much in different places. And at the end of the day, your feet should be dirty and your hair messy and your eyes sparkling. The last thing is Google Translate. This thing rocks. Apple Siri does translate really well now too. And in fact, it'll do it by holding it up to it. But I use Google Translate. You can download the languages, so you don't even have to have connectivity. But here's what it does. You look at a sign and it will translate the sign for you. And Siri will do that now too on the iPhone. And you just do it with photos. All right, Randy, you've got a question. Oh, don't forget to take chargers, uh, noise canceling headphones, backup batteries. Do not use the little iPhone charger on the left, because that gives you hardly any power. You want something that's at least 2.4 amps for all of them. The iPad one works, or the others. You've got to have, it's got to charge and ready in plenty of quickness. And I think that's, the Great Wall. Don't listen to what they say, go see. The goal is to die with memories, not dreams. Randy, go ahead.
Yes, regarding travel, of course, it's got to be great because I saw it on YouTube as an ad. Holafly, Holafly. I don't, it says it's stay connected on international using eSIM, buy it by the country you're in. Just
So what that
use
is
T-Mobile
essentially
and forget about it, right?
yeah, well, that's a hotspot is what it is.
Okay.
So the majority of the phones, Apple phones coming out now, you can use eSIM, or you can physical SIM, but they have dual SIMs. So you can keep your regular SIM in. But yeah, if you're traveling internationally, T-Mobile's the ticket, because you can go 215 countries plus, and you get free data, you get free texting. If you're on Wi-Fi, you get free calling. If you're not on Wi-Fi, the calls are 26 cents a minute. So it's really, really, really good. You can up that plan if you want to make it a little quicker. But what I do too, because sometimes the T-Mobile one is not super fast, I will get an eSIM to use my second SIM for data when I'm in a country. I look at, or if I'm in multiple countries, I look for Vodafone or one of those where they'll cover multiple countries. And for $30 for a month, you're going to get unlimited data, very high speed, and you're not having to worry about it. But in fact, with T-Mobile, it's great. You land in the country. I'm sure when Al landed, it says, "Welcome to Ireland. Go ahead and use your phone." And all. I mean, it makes it painless.
The other one was MPC, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. It either goes by CBP or
Well, it's Mobile Passport Control is what that stands for. That's an app. And I encourage you to do that. If you don't, even if you have TSA pre or global entry, it's still a good idea to do it. What it is those little white forms you have to fill out. You can do it before you get there. And as you're getting to the queue, it's already done, and it's free, and it gets you right through. And it is a TSA, a real TSA app. I'm glad you brought that up. It's called Mobile Passport or Mobile Passport Control, and it's a U.S. Customs thing, and it's quite good.
You covered conversions, exchange rates and conversions previously in one of your classes. Is XE the app that you use?
XE, I actually use Currency Pro, but XE is fine. What you want to do on those is you want to also make sure you download it while you're on Wi-Fi, because if they haven't updated the currency recently, it might not do it. And when you're using a credit card, except in Argentina, don't always do it in local currency, because if they convert it to dollars there, the credit card handler is going to try and make money on that transaction. And therefore, you're better off, because the credit card company you use will use what's called banker's buyer's rate. So in other words, they get the most favorable conversion rate of anything. I highly recommend, if you have a Schwab account, or you might want to get a Schwab account, because if you need to use an ATM anywhere in the world, it will not only pay your ATM fee anywhere in the world, it just reimburses you. It will also has the best conversion rate. So that's a Schwab debit card for cash transactions if you want to withdraw cash from there. And then the credit card I recommend is Sapphire Reserve. And before we close out, I'll give it to Al and put it in the links. So
Last one, Ken, is Rick Steves on their recent Monday travel on apps to consider, think about. Just wondered your feedback, recommendation, or don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. One was WhatsApp. They said for like calls, international WhatsApp, and TripIt, upload confirmations itinerary.
yes. So first of all, WhatsApp is the biggest app in the world. The unfortunate part is it's owned by Facebook. So it's very good. It's what the world uses to communicate. Think about it like iMessage for everybody. You can do video calls, you can do audio calls, you can also do text messaging, and but each end has to have WhatsApp for that to do it. And then but it's good and capable, but it's Facebook. So it's what I would say is the other one was what was it?
TripIt.
TripIt. TripIt is a very good app. I may start using it because I used to use Google had a thing for it. TripIt is a pay for service. But it's a great way to keep your itineraries and everything. I can't give you any personal. Everybody says it's great, and I'm going to stop cheaping out and probably get it because it's so beneficial. What I do is I put everything I have in notes. I put my itineraries. In fact, when I arrived in Japan, our wonderful tour guide there had a 20-page printed out in color, all our stops and everything like that. So rather than carry that darn thing around, I scanned it with my iPhone into notes, and I had the real copy, but I also had that with me all the time using notes. So
I also had a pretty good experience with the app called Flighty for
spell it.
it's FLIGHTY. It's for like flight updates, and it can, if you travel a great deal, it can give you entire flight history that you've taken, how many trips around the world, and it also takes if you use TripIt to aggregate all your itinerary stuff, it can hoover that information to input all your information into the app. It's highly regarded. If you look at the reviews there on the App Store, it's pretty popular.
FLIGHTY.
Yes.
Because I use FlightAware, and so if you want to look at current flights and stuff,
Yeah.
FlightAware is great. Like if you're picking somebody up at the airport. Very cool. Is it free, Al?
No, it's a subscription deal. I think there's a free tier for a couple of flights to get your feet wet on it, and they have different tiers of a subscription. So I auditioned, and I for this year and stuff. Mary and I doing some traveling, and I wanted to give it a shot after I heard some pretty glowing reviews. And
good. Well, I'll look into that too. And you guys, the big thing here is it gives you notifications if your gate changes and things like that, because man, I'll tell you, and FlightAware will do the same thing. And I'm not sure, but I think TripIt also does. And what they do is this is all in a big database and they track it. And so it's important to have one of those because there's nothing like going 15 minutes across an airport and you're going to the wrong terminal.
Yeah. It tells you if your gates are changing. It
Right.
it tells you what if the flight you're gonna take, if it's landed yet in the
Well, yeah, it'll tell you where the incoming plane is, which is always a big deal too, because you're obviously the plane you're going to take has to go from somewhere. So
it'll tell you
that's
how
cool. I encourage you to look at that. We have one last question because we're only a half hour over. Don McBride, go for it.
Yeah, a year or so ago, you gave a talk about photo editing apps, like removing a telephone pole. You mentioned Retouch. Is that one of them here?
I meant it. What? Which
I
one?
thought today you mentioned Retouch.
Okay, Retouch is actually built in, and I'll show you. Let's pull up photos here really quick. It didn't used to be very good, but it's phenomenal now. So let's just go into, look at my library here. Actually, let's try it on one of our shots from today. So here we have this. So if I go, and it's not on the phone, it's only, there is one called retouch, touch retouch on the phone you can do. But right under here, it's called retouch. And I can adjust the size of the thing. So I'm going to go like that. And let's see, this will be difficult actually. But it's for removing power lines and stuff. There's other, I used to have a program called Snap Heal I used. That's not going to do it. So let me Command Z. Actually, let's try a different photo. This one's pretty bad. Here we go. Let's take the word fast charge and pretend like this is a blemish on somebody's face. Got rid of that. Let's see if it'll get rid of this yellow. And you guys are seeing my screen, right? Yeah, okay. Kind of got rid of the yellow, not very great. There's other ones. My favorite is Snap Heal. For instance, let's say this silver thing on this. Kind of, and then I can touch it up a little more. Kind of got rid of it. This little blemish right here, which is a reflection, got rid of that. Let's try this little cord right here. Got rid of that cord. Let's see if it gets rid of this cord. And they actually, it's this is the built-in one in Photos, and it's just gotten really good.
I stopped.
Yeah, so you got rid of that cord pretty much. Here, we'll get rid of the white card here. There you go. Go ahead, Barbara. Last question of the day.
Yeah, so did you get to that retouch by going into the edit function on your computer?
Correct.
Okay,
And you may have to disclose it because it may or may not, it may be closed like this, or you may have to go up here and there's a button up here that says add. I don't have it because I have everything unveiled, but there would be a thing here that says add, and then you would add retouch.
so you do it on your computer, not your phone.
Yeah, you'd have to get an app to do it on the phone. The phone,
Okay.
as I remember, let me check really quick. I don't think retouch on the phone works. I don't think there is a retouch. Well, actually, there kind of is now because there's a press and hold where you can remove something, but it doesn't do it. Let's see. No. So cancel. But yeah, not on the phone. There's retouch is the one I've used on the phone before. But I would think that they're working on that on the phone because it's a big deal. So, all right. Anybody else? Thank you for sticking around extra. And I'm sorry it took so long. And if you have any questions, reach out to me. I did put the link for the Chase Sapphire Reserve inside there. If you have any questions on that, feel free to message me. I swear by that card and I love it. And realistically, if you buy insurance for a trip and you do any type of travel, like it paid for my parking in San Francisco was my very first one with the card. Every year it does $300 credit. So instead of, it costs you $550 right out of the box, you'll get 75,000 free miles. And you then get, it covers your insurance. It's really better for your car or your rental insurance on your car. And then the last thing is it gives you lounge access in priority pass lounges. And there's tons of other perks. So take a look at it. I am a very frugal person and I don't mind spending that because I get the value of it. I get much more value out of that. In fact, I have enough points on there now that that's what's going to give me my round the world flight in business class on Singapore Airlines and the rest of the Star Alliance planes. So anyway, that's about it. Okay. If people are cruisers, I got a big tip for you. If you own, you would, of the three major cruise lines that own most of the cruise lines, Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and Carnival, that own most of the cruise lines, if you own 100 shares of their stock, you get a $100 to $250 credit in your cabin on every trip you take on any of those. And it depends on the length of the cruise. If it's over 10 days, you get 250. If it's less than 10 days, you get 100. And you just get it from regardless of anything else you do. So talk to everybody later. Al, you can do a chat save. Thanks for the tip on Flighty. I like it. So, okay, everybody, thank you. Stop my share. Good deal. Okay. And we'll see the rest of you in a half hour. Good for everybody.